My name is Lillian, and for 30 years, I lived what I thought was a perfect life. Our big house just outside the city limits was my haven, a place where happiness seemed to bloom endlessly. My husband, Tom, was my rock. Our son, Jake, was the light of our lives, a budding football star at his college. I remember the day Jake brought home Sarah, his girlfriend. She was a sweet girl with a gentle smile and kind eyes. I took to her immediately, seeing in her the daughter I never had. They'd come over often, filling our house with youthful laughter and dreams of the future. As I watched them, I couldn't help but think about wedding bells and their future. They seemed so perfect together, so in sync. I'd already started thinking of Sarah as part of our family. As the days passed, I noticed Jake becoming increasingly excited about something. He'd burst into the house after practice, practically vibrating with energy. At first, I chalked it up to his passion for football and his relationship with Sarah. But there was something different about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jake bounded into the kitchen, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Mom, guess what? I'm going to a competition in the neighboring state." I turned from the stove, smiling at his excitement. "That's wonderful, honey. When is it?" "We leave next week," he replied, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "It's a big deal, Mom. Could be a real game changer for my career." Something about his demeanor struck me as odd. Jake had been to many competitions before, but he'd never been quite this keyed up about one. "Are you okay, Jake?" I asked, studying his face. "You seem different." He waved off my concern with a laugh. "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine. You don't need to worry about me. This is just a really important opportunity, that's all." I nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to let it go. "All right, sweetie. Just remember, you can always talk to me if something's on your mind." 3 long months passed, and Jake was still gone. At first, I wasn't too concerned. These competitions could sometimes run longer than expected, especially if the team was doing well. I called him regularly, and each time, he assured me everything was fine. "The competition's just lasting longer than we thought, Mom," he'd say. "Don't worry about me." I believed him. After all, Jake had never lied to me before. Why would he start now? Still, as the weeks dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. One evening, as Tom and I sat on the porch, I voiced my concerns. "Don't you think it's odd that Jake's been gone so long?" Tom sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "It is unusual, but if he says everything's okay, we should trust him. He's a grown man now, Lil." Finally, after 3 months, Jake returned. But the bombshell he dropped on us was nothing I could have prepared for. "Mom, Dad," he announced one evening, "I've decided I want to live separately. I'm going to rent an apartment." I exchanged a surprised look with Tom. This was unexpected, but not entirely unreasonable. Jake was an adult, after all. "If that's what you want, son," Tom said, "we support your decision." I nodded in agreement, albeit with a hint of sadness. Our baby was really growing up. "Just know you're always welcome here, Jake." Over the next few weeks, Jake rarely visited. Instead, he'd send messages, often asking for money. Each time, I'd transfer the funds, hoping it would help him become more independent. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something had changed in our relationship. Then came the phone call that would turn our world upside down. "Mom," Jake's voice crackled over the line, "I'm coming over tonight. I've got some important news to share. And I won't be alone." My heart leaped with excitement. Could it be? Were Jake and Sarah finally taking the next step? "That's wonderful, honey," I exclaimed. "I'll cook up a special dinner for us all." As I hung up the phone, I turned to Tom with a wide grin. "I think our boy's finally going to make it official with Sarah." Tom chuckled, pulling me into a hug. "Well, it's about time. They make a great couple." I spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, preparing Jake's favorite dishes, and setting the table with our best china. This was a momentous occasion, and I wanted everything to be perfect. As evening fell, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. My heart raced with anticipation as I smoothed down my dress and went to open the door. But the sight that greeted me was nothing like what I had expected. Jake stood there, all right, but the woman by his side wasn't Sarah. This girl was a stranger, strikingly beautiful, dressed in bright, provocative clothing that seemed out of place for a family dinner. "Mom," Jake said, his voice oddly flat, "I'd like you to meet Veronica, my wife." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of cruel joke. But the defiant look in Jake's eyes and the smug smile on Veronica's face told me it was all too real. We all moved to the dining room in a daze. As we sat down at the table I'd so carefully prepared, I couldn't stop staring at Veronica. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something cold in her eyes that made me uneasy. Jake, seeming oblivious to the tension, launched into a description of their wedding. "We had an amazing ceremony at that new upscale venue downtown. You should have seen it, Mom. The flowers, the music, everything was perfect." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my heart. "How could you celebrate your wedding without the people closest to you?" I asked, fighting back tears. Jake's face hardened. "The closest person to me is my wife," he declared. "I want to make her happy." Veronica raised her head, a smug smile playing on her lips. Jake continued, his voice softening slightly. "Veronica's parents abandoned her years ago. Her grandmother raised her, but she passed away recently. I didn't want Veronica to feel lonely at our wedding, so we decided not to invite any relatives. We celebrated with just our friends." I sat there, trying to process this information. Then a thought struck me. "Jake, what about Sarah? What happened with her?" Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I left her," he mumbled. She cheated on me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sweet, kind Sarah, cheating? It didn't make any sense. Trying to understand more about this woman who had suddenly become part of our family, I turned to Veronica. "So, Veronica," I began, attempting to keep my voice steady, "where are you from originally?" Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained silent. Undeterred, I pressed on. "What do you do for a living? Are you working somewhere at the moment?" Again, Veronica avoided answering, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Perhaps you could tell us a bit about your interests? What do you like to do in your free time?" I tried once more, desperation creeping into my voice. At this, Veronica abruptly stood up. "I'm not obliged to discuss my personal life with outsiders," she announced haughtily. "We're leaving." Without so much as a thank you for the dinner, she strode towards the door. Jake jumped up to follow her, pausing only to ask me to pack some food for them and transfer money for their honeymoon. As the door slammed behind them, Tom and I sat in stunned silence. The next day, still reeling from the previous night's events, I decided to call Jake. I needed answers, needed to understand what was going on. But when the call connected, it wasn't Jake's voice I heard. "Jake's busy right now," Veronica's cold voice came through the speaker. "He can't talk. But you can send money for our honeymoon to his card. We have nothing else to discuss with you." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, shock giving way to a deep, aching sadness. What had happened to my sweet boy? And how had this woman gained such control over him? With a heavy heart, I transferred several $1,000s to Jake's account. It was all I could do, the only way I could still feel connected to my son. Weeks passed, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Tom and I tried to come to terms with Jake's sudden marriage, but the silence from our son was deafening. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Jake. "Mom," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I've got amazing news. Veronica's pregnant. We're going to have a baby." My heart leaped. A grandchild. Despite everything, joy surged through me. "Oh, Jake, that's wonderful news. Yeah, it's great, he continued, his tone shifting slightly. But, we need some help. Preparing for a baby is expensive, you know? I transferred a substantial amount to Jake's account, my heart full of hope. Maybe this baby would bring our family back together. A few weeks later, I was tidying up the living room when I heard a car pull up. To my surprise, Jake and Veronica burst through the front door without knocking. Veronica strode past me, her eyes scanning every corner of our home. "This house will do nicely," she declared, her tone matter of fact. "I'm sorry, what?" I stammered, confused. Jake stepped forward, his face set in determination. "Mom, we've decided that we're going to live here. You and Dad need to find somewhere else to stay." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "What are you talking about? This is our home." Veronica turned to me, her eyes cold. "For the proper development of our child, we need freedom and space. This house is perfect." Anger bubbled up inside me. "Absolutely not. This is our home, and you can't just demand we leave." Veronica's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Fine. But you can forget about having any relationship with your son or your future grandchild." Before I could respond, they turned and stormed out, leaving me standing in shock. From that day on, my phone was flooded with messages from Jake. Each one demanded we give them the house, each one more insulting and threatening than the last. I couldn't believe the cruel words coming from my son. What had happened to him? 2 weeks of this torment passed, before Jake showed up at our door again. His face was contorted with rage. "You need to give us this house," he shouted. "Veronica's threatening to divorce me if you don't. Do you want to ruin my marriage?" I tried to reason with him. "Jake, honey, can't you see? She's blackmailing you. This isn't right." His face turned an alarming shade of red. "Don't you dare talk about Veronica like that. You're not worth a hair on her head." That was the final straw for Tom. Without a word, he grabbed Jake by the arm and forcefully escorted him out the door, slamming it behind him. As Jake's angry shouts faded, I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. Tom knelt beside me, wrapping his arms around me. Weeks passed, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Tom and I tried to process the drastic changes in our son's behavior, but the pain and confusion lingered. One day, while shopping for groceries, I heard a familiar voice call out my name. "Lillian?" I turned to see Sarah, Jake's ex-fiancée, standing by the produce section. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed her heavily pregnant belly. Memories of Jake's accusations about her cheating flooded back, and I found myself at a loss for words. Gathering my composure, I managed to smile. "Sarah, I had no idea you were expecting. How are you feeling?" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. It's not easy," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Being pregnant and abandoned, it's been tough." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Abandoned? That didn't align with Jake's story at all. Sensing there was more to this situation, I gently probed for details. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Can you tell me what happened?" "Jake told us, well, he said you had cheated on him." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Cheated? Lillian, no. That's not what happened at all." Over the next half hour, as we stood in the quiet corner of the grocery store, Sarah revealed the truth that shattered my world. "Jake didn't go to any sports competition," she explained, her voice trembling. "He met a girl online and went to meet her in another state. He was gone for 3 months, remember?" I nodded, the pieces starting to fall into place. Sarah continued. "When I found out I was pregnant, I called Jake to tell him the news. But he told me he had married someone else. He refused to have anything to do with the baby." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the shopping cart for support, trying to process this information. Our Jake, our sweet boy, had lied to us all. He had abandoned Sarah and their unborn child for a woman he barely knew. We parted ways with promises to stay in touch, and I headed home in a daze. My mind was reeling from the revelations. Jake's story about the extended competition, his sudden marriage to Veronica, his cruel treatment of us, it all made a twisted kind of sense now. As I walked through our front door, Tom took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Lil, what happened?" he asked, concern etched on his features. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "Tom, sit down," I said. "There's something you need to know about Jake." As I recounted my conversation with Sarah, I watched the color drain from Tom's face. Our son had lied to us, abandoned his pregnant fiancée, and married a virtual stranger. In the days following my encounter with Sarah, Tom and I had many long, difficult conversations. We both felt a deep sense of responsibility towards Sarah and her unborn child, our grandchild. "We need to help her, Tom," I said one evening. "She shouldn't have to go through this alone." Tom nodded in agreement. "You're right. Let's reach out to her." When we approached Sarah with our offer of support, she initially refused, her pride and hurt evident in her eyes. But as the weeks passed and we gently persisted, she eventually accepted our help. I began to see her often, accompanying her to doctor's appointments, helping her prepare for the baby's arrival, and simply being there as a shoulder to cry on. One evening, as I returned home from helping Sarah set up the nursery, Tom met me with a serious expression. "Lil, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice grave. "I hired a private detective." I stared at him in shock. "You did what?" Tom sighed heavily. "I needed to know what was really going on with Jake. The detective's report came in today, and Lil, it's worse than we thought." Over the next hour, Tom revealed the detective's findings. Jake had dropped out of college, abandoning his sports career and education to get a job supporting Veronica's extravagant spending habits. The detective had overheard a conversation between Jake and Veronica, where they coldly discussed plans to force us out of our home and claim it for themselves. But the most shocking revelation was about Veronica's past. She had a history of pursuing wealthy men for their money. The detective discovered that Veronica had become pregnant by one of these men and had manipulated Jake into marriage by claiming the child was his. I stood up, my mind racing. "We have to tell Jake. We have to make him see what's happening." But Tom shook his head sadly. "Lil, he won't believe us. You've seen how he is now. If we try to tell him, he'll only push us further away." As much as it pained me, I knew Tom was right. Jake was so under Veronica's influence that any attempt to reveal the truth would likely backfire. "What do we do, then?" I asked, feeling helpless. Tom took my hand in his. "For now, we focus on Sarah and the baby. They're the ones who truly need us right now." I nodded, fighting back tears. "You're right. Sarah needs us, and that baby, our grandchild, they're innocent in all of this." As we sat there, processing all we had learned, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger, sadness, and fear for Jake. But I also felt a renewed sense of purpose. We might not be able to help Jake right now, but we could be there for Sarah and her baby. And maybe, just maybe, by showing Jake what real love and support looked like, we could eventually break through to him. Just when Tom and I thought things couldn't get any worse, we woke up one morning to find our house defaced with cruel, insulting graffiti. "Greedy oldsters, selfish bastards," and other hurtful words were spray-painted across our walls in angry red letters. Shocked and hurt, we immediately called our neighbor across the street, who had outdoor security cameras. We watched the footage with heavy hearts, witnessing our own son vandalizing our home in the dead of night. The sight of Jake, sneaking around like a common criminal, left us speechless. We didn't confront Jake about the graffiti. Instead, we quietly painted over the hateful words and put our house on the market. Within weeks, we had sold our longtime home and purchased a new one, not far from where Sarah lived with her newborn son, our grandson. The day Sarah brought little Thomas home from the hospital was bittersweet. As I held that tiny bundle in my arms, my heart swelled with love and broke simultaneously. This was my grandson, Jake's son, yet Jake wanted nothing to do with him. Weeks passed, and we settled into our new life. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Jake, calling from an unfamiliar number. "Mom," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "What the hell is going on?" "I went to the house and there are strangers living there. They threatened to call the cops on me." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Why did you go there, Jake? To vandalize our home again?" There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "That's right," I continued, my voice steady. "We know it was you. We sold the house, Jake. And we've cut you out of our lives." Jake's shock quickly turned to anger. "You can't do this to me," he yelled. "Veronica might leave me because of you. I'll never see my son." I couldn't help but laugh, a sad, hollow sound. "Oh, Jake. That child isn't yours. Veronica lied to you." "What are you talking about?" he sputtered. "We hired a private investigator, Jake. We know everything. About Veronica's past, about her lying about your paternity, about your plans to take our house. I'm sending you the evidence now." As I hit send on the email containing the detective's report, I heard Jake's sharp intake of breath. "You're a fool, Jake," I said, my voice softening slightly. "You abandoned Sarah and your real son for a woman who's been lying to you from the start. I hope one day you'll realize what you've thrown away." With that, I hung up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. 6 months passed in a blur of baby giggles, sleepless nights, and newfound joy. Tom and I had settled into our roles as doting grandparents, cherishing every moment with little Thomas. Our new home, though smaller, was filled with more love and laughter than we'd experienced in years. One sunny afternoon, as we sat on our porch watching Sarah push Thomas on the swing we'd installed in the backyard, our neighbor walked by with some surprising news. "Did you hear about Jake?" she asked, her voice low. "Word is, that wife of his up and left him. Apparently, she handed their child over to her parents, turns out she wasn't an orphan after all, and ran off with some wealthy man she met." Tom and I exchanged glances, a mix of emotions washing over us. Despite everything, a part of me still ached for the pain Jake must be going through. Later that evening, as if summoned by our thoughts, Jake called. His voice was a far cry from the angry, demanding tone we'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he sounded broken, desperate. "Mom," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. For everything. Please, can we start over? I know I'm still your sole heir. I can change, I promise." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. "Oh, Jake," I said softly. "I'm sorry you're hurting. But you need to know, your father and I have changed our will. Everything we have will go to Thomas, your son, the one you abandoned." Jake's sobs turned to shouts. "No. You can't do that. I'll go back to Sarah, we can start over." "Goodbye, Jake," I said firmly, and ended the call. Tom found me on the porch swing a little while later, staring out at the setting sun. He sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "I am. It's not the ending I would have chosen for us, but I think we're exactly where we're meant to be." And we were. Our new life, though different from what we'd imagined, was filled with purpose and love. Every weekend, our home was filled with the joyous sounds of Thomas's laughter as he explored every nook and cranny. Sarah, once just our son's girlfriend, had become the daughter we never had. "Grandma, Grandpa." Thomas's little voice called out one Sunday afternoon. "Look what I can do." We watched in delight as he took his first wobbly steps across the living room, collapsing into Sarah's waiting arms. Sarah looked up at us, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I don't know what I would have done without you two," she said softly. "You've been more like parents to me than I ever expected to have." I knelt down beside her, wrapping them both in a hug. "Oh, sweetheart. You and Thomas, you're our family. We couldn't love you more if we tried." As I looked around at the faces of my family, Tom's weathered smile, Sarah's gentle eyes, Thomas's chubby cheeks, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. This was not the life I had planned, but But it was a life filled with more love, more joy, and more purpose than I could have ever imagined. Let me introduce myself. I'm Anna. Dentistry runs in my blood. Both my parents and my granddad were doctors of teeth. Granddad left me a nice chunk of change when he passed. Between that and the dough I'd saved from filling cavities and yanking wisdom teeth, I managed to scrap together $300,000. Enough to snatch up a cozy house right near my clinic, with a lawn lush enough to make the neighbors jealous. I love that house. It's not just the fresh paint or the way the morning light spills through the bay windows, it's mine, all mine. Bought and paid for with years of staring into other people's mouths. But enough about me. Let's talk about the day my life took a sharp left turn. It was a lazy Sunday, my only day off, and I decided to hit the mall. Just wandering, killing time. That's when it happened. I turned a corner and bam! Collided with this guy, tall, kind of lanky, with a panicked look as he juggled a set of fancy glassware. I reached out to help, but nope, too late. Crash, right there on the shiny tile floor. Pieces everywhere. Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry. I blurted out. My face must have been 50 shades of red. The guy, bless his soul, just shrugged and let out a laugh that echoed down the aisle. Hey, no worries. I've got butterfingers. Should have known better than to try and juggle these. I crouched down, trying to pick up the mess, feeling every bit the klutz. Let me pay for these, please. It's the least I can do. He tried to wave me off. Really, it's fine. Accidents happen, right? But I wasn't having any of that. I insisted, and finally, he relented. All right, if it makes you feel better, sure. After paying for the disaster I caused, he asked, "Coffee?" on me, as a thank you for being decent about this mess. Maybe it was his easy smile or just my sheer embarrassment, but I agreed. That coffee turned into us chatting for over an hour about everything and nothing. His name was Eric. He was a mobile app developer, a real techie, lived in a rented flat not too far from the mall. We even joked about how we could have been neighbors and never known it. Yeah, could have borrowed sugar from you or something, he said with a wink. Or dental advice. Free consultations over coffee, I joked back. Before we knew it, the mall was announcing closing time. We exchanged numbers, and he promised to call. I walked back to my car, shaking my head at how a day that started with me as a bull in a china shop could end with me feeling like I'd just walked out of a rom-com. Eric didn't waste any time. The very next day, my phone buzzed with a message from him. Hey, Anna, how about dinner tonight? I promised to keep all breakables at a safe distance. I laughed at that, the memory of yesterday's disaster still fresh. Sure, why not? I typed back. But let's make it somewhere with plastic plates, just in case. Dinner was at this laid-back pizza place he knew about. The kind of spot where you could yell across the room and nobody would bat an eye. We grabbed a corner booth, and he waved down a waitress with a, "Hey, can we get some menus over here?" that was loud enough to compete with the chatter around us. As we waited for our food, conversation flowed like cheap wine, easy and a bit too much. He had a knack for storytelling, and his hands did half the talking, waving around as he described the latest app he was developing. It's gonna be huge, Anna. Think, like, the next level of dating apps where you don't just see photos, but hear the person's playlist too. Sounds complicated, I admitted, sipping my soda and watching his enthusiasm bubble over. Music and love, huh? Exactly, he exclaimed. Music tells you a lot about a person. More than a bio or a stupid selfie. We dug into our pizza, and he asked about my day at the clinic. I told him about the usual root canals and cavity fillings, nothing as exciting as app development. It's not groundbreaking, but it pays for my house and lets me meet interesting people. Like you, I added with a smirk. Hey, I'm flattered to be considered interesting, he said, raising his eyebrows in mock surprise. Our pizza crusts were the only thing left when he leaned in, more serious now. Anna, I really like you. There's something about you that just clicks with me. I felt the warmth rise to my cheeks. I feel the same, Eric. It's like we've known each other for years, not just days. Then let's not slow down, he suggested, his voice dropping to a near whisper across the table. Let's see where this goes. From then on, we were inseparable. If we weren't at work, we were together, movies, picnics, sometimes just long drives with no destination. He'd show up at my house with takeout from some new place he wanted us to try, and we'd end up talking till the wee hours of the morning. One evening, sprawled on my couch, he turned to me, his expression more serious than usual. Anna, I'm falling hard for you. I don't want games or maybes. I want this, us. I didn't hesitate. I'm all in, Eric. Completely. It felt right, like all the pieces were falling into place. He fit into my life like he was always meant to be there. His clothes started filling up some space in my closet, and his toothbrush found a spot next to mine in the bathroom. It was domestic, comfortable, and just plain real. We were talking about the future one night, lying in my backyard, looking up at the stars. Big family, huh, he mused, his hand finding mine in the dark. Yeah, the bigger, the better. Fill the house with kids and chaos, I said, the idea warming me more than the summer night air. He squeezed my hand. Sounds perfect. Chaotic and loud, but perfect. The wedding day came faster than a heartbeat. I was all nerves and butterflies, but when I saw Eric waiting for me at the altar, everything else just faded away. He was grinning like he'd won the lottery, and honestly, so was I. The ceremony was a blur of vows and cheers, and before I knew it, we were man and wife. The party afterward was loud and lively, just like we wanted. It was during the reception that I first really talked to Eric's parents, who'd flown in from some tropical paradise they'd retired to. His mom, Linda, was all smiles, dripping with jewelry, and his dad, Mark, was this laid-back type who seemed happy just watching everyone else have a good time. Anna, dear, you look absolutely lovely, Linda gushed, pulling me into a hug that felt a bit too tight. We're so thrilled, aren't we, Mark? Mark nodded, a beer in hand. Absolutely. Eric's a lucky guy. I thanked them, feeling a bit overwhelmed. But it was their next words that started to clue me in on the future. We're so glad to be back. Now that we're here, we'll be seeing a lot more of you both, Linda beamed, not noticing my hesitant smile. Looking forward to it, I managed to say, but the music thankfully drowned out any need for further conversation. As the weeks rolled by after the honeymoon, Eric's parents didn't head back to their island. Instead, they took up semi-permanent residence at a local hotel and became regular fixtures in our lives. It started small. Linda would drop by, usually unannounced, to give friendly advice on how I could improve my home. One Saturday morning, she arrived just as Eric and I were enjoying a lazy breakfast. Without knocking, she waltzed into the kitchen and frowned at the spread on our table. Pancakes and bacon? That's not a very healthy breakfast, is it? Linda chided, her nose wrinkling as if she smelled something foul. Eric, bless him, jumped in. Mom, Anna's an amazing cook. We're happy with her food, really. Linda didn't look convinced, but changed the subject. Anyway, I was thinking we need to have a family dinner soon. Invite some of our friends to meet the lovely new bride. She was already planning it out loud, not asking, but telling. I glanced at Eric, who shrugged helplessly. This was his way of keeping the peace, I knew, but it grated on me. This pattern kept up, Linda's visits growing more frequent and her suggestions turning into demands. She started rearranging my kitchen, critiquing my decorating, and even commenting on how I should dress. One day, out of the blue, she declared she was throwing a party at our house. Not asking, declaring. Your house is just perfect for entertaining, Anna. So cozy, and that lawn. My friends will love it. I blinked, taken aback by her nerve. Okay, Linda. When were you thinking? This Saturday, dear. You won't have to worry about a thing. Just some snacks, maybe those cute little finger sandwiches you do. Oh, and make sure there's plenty of ice. You always run out. I stood there, mouth agape, as she pranced around, sizing up my living room for her grand plans. When Eric got home, I let him have it. Eric, your mom's throwing a party here this Saturday. Did you know about this? He sighed, a deep, weary sound. She mentioned wanting to do something nice for her friends. Nice for her, maybe. This is our home, not her social club. I know. But could we just let her have this one? Just to keep the peace? I was fuming, but I agreed. Anything for peace, right? Saturday came, and I found myself up at the crack of dawn, crafting hors d'oeuvres and chilling drinks. Linda arrived early, not to help, but to direct. Make sure the glasses are spotless, Anna. And use the good plates, not those everyday ones. Her friends started flowing in by noon, a parade of perfumed, chattering women who knew my house better than I did by the time Linda was done touring them around. And here's the living room, completely redecorated by Eric and me, she announced, while I gritted my teeth and refilled wine glasses. At one point, Linda cornered me in the kitchen. Make sure you check on Mrs. Henderson regularly. She's almost 80, you know. Can't have her feeling neglected. I was juggling trays and my patience, but I plastered on a smile. Of course, Linda. Anything else? Well, make sure you're smiling. It doesn't look like you're enjoying yourself, dear. The party dragged on forever. Or that's how it felt, with me playing waitress and maid, while Linda played the queen of the castle. By the time the last guest left, I was ready to collapse. Eric helped me clean up, looking as defeated as I felt. Babe, I'm so sorry. I didn't think she'd take over like that, he murmured as we stacked the last dishwasher-safe plate. Yeah, well, she did. And she said it's her son's house. Like I'm just crashing here. Eric, it hurt. Eric's face hardened, and he put the glass down a little too sharply. That's not okay. I'm gonna talk to her, Anna. This isn't right. But even as he said it, we both knew talking to Linda was about as effective as using a sieve to catch rain. She'd nod, smile, and go right back to her ways. And deep down, I feared that this party was just the beginning of her marking her territory, showing me who was really in charge. The aftermath of that first party felt like waking up from a bad dream, except the nightmare was real, and it had set up camp right in my living room. When Linda casually dropped the bomb that she and her friends would now be using my house for their weekly gatherings, my jaw hit the floor. Every Saturday, Anna. Everyone just loved the setup here. It's so much more intimate than the country club, Linda chirped, as if she was doing me a favor. Hold on, every Saturday? Linda, that's really not going to work for us, I replied, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. She waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense, it's settled. Don't fuss. But I wasn't about to let this slide. No, it's not settled. This is our home, not a social club. It's just too much. That's when the storm broke. Linda's face twisted into something ugly, her voice sharp as shattered glass. You ungrateful girl. I'm only trying to keep a social life. What, are you going to deny an old woman that? The argument escalated quickly. She screamed, swore, and even threw a vase that shattered against the wall. Then she dropped a bombshell that chilled my blood. If you don't fall in line, I'll make sure my son leaves you. I can do it, you know. I was stunned. The threat of using Eric's emotional dependency against me was a low blow, and it showed just how far she was willing to go. I spent the night in turmoil, dreading each ring of the phone, each knock at the door. The next Saturday, like clockwork, Linda and her entourage appeared. I felt like a puppet in my own home, serving and smiling through gritted teeth. After they left, leaving chaos in their wake, I knew something had to give. I found Eric in the living room, looking as defeated as I felt. Eric, we need to talk. This can't go on. He looked up, tired. I know, Anna, I know. But what can we do? That's my mom. Your mom is blackmailing me, threatening our marriage to get what she wants. How did we get here? My voice cracked, the weight of the last few weeks crashing down on me. Eric ran his hands through his hair, a sign of his frustration. I don't know, Anna. I don't know what to do. That's when it hit me, an idea so crazy it might just work. What if we got a divorce? Eric stared at me, shocked. Divorce? Anna, I love you, why would? Not for real, I rushed to explain. A fake divorce. We stay together, secretly. Maybe if she thinks she's won, she'll back off. It was risky, but Eric agreed. The next day, we quietly filed for divorce. It was surreal, signing those papers. We even laughed through our disbelief over coffee afterward, whispering plans and promises to each other. Saturday rolled around with the speed of a freight train, and I knew Linda and her parade of friends would soon be knocking at my door, expecting the usual royal treatment. Only this time, I had a different plan. The divorce papers were tucked away in a drawer, and my resolve was as hard as the knock on the door that morning. I swung the door open, planting myself firmly in the threshold. Morning, Linda. How can I help you today? The surprise on her face was almost comical as she stared at me, standing there, clearly not moving aside to let them in. Her friends clustered behind her, peering over her shoulder with curious and expectant looks. We're here for breakfast, dear. Open up, we're all quite hungry, Linda announced, as if it was the most natural thing in the world to say. I didn't budge an inch. Actually, there's a lovely cafe just around the corner. I'm sure they'd be delighted to serve you. Linda's face fell, and then twisted into a mask of anger. What on earth are you talking about, Anna? This is your duty, as part of this family, to host us. You're supposed to make us feel welcome and cater to us. Her words were sharp, meant to cut deep, but I stood my ground. Linda, things have changed. I divorced your son. You're essentially strangers to me now. The gasp that rippled through the group could have been mistaken for the wind. Murmurs swirled as Linda's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in suspicion. That's nonsense, she blustered. I don't believe you. Let me call Eric right now. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking slightly as she dialed. I could hear Eric's voice through the speaker, calm but firm. Mom, Anna's right. We're divorced. Please respect her space. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp as she processed his words. But I thought, her voice trailed off, a mix of confusion and anger brewing in her eyes. I suggest you go enjoy your breakfast at the cafe. They really do have excellent coffee, I said, my tone final. I turned, stepping back into the house and shutting the door firmly behind me. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outlines of Linda and her friends, rooted to the spot in disbelief. They lingered for a moment longer, a cluster of confused and indignant silhouettes, before they slowly dispersed. Inside, the silence was deafening. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had done it. I had stood up to Linda in a way I never thought possible. The house felt different now, like it was truly mine again, its walls firmer, the air fresher. Eric and I started meeting in secret, like two teenagers sneaking around, trying to avoid strict parents. Our friends knew the drill and played along, keeping our secret safe from Linda's ever-watchful eye. It felt like we were main characters in some spy movie, always looking over our shoulders, whispering in corners. Funny as it sounds, it brought us closer, glued together by our little conspiracy. One chilly evening, huddled in the back booth of our favorite out-of-the-way diner, Eric slid a napkin across the table with something scribbled on it. I unfolded it, and there, in his messy handwriting, was a list of real estate listings. I'd been thinking, maybe it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new, somewhere Mom doesn't know about. I looked up, surprised but intrigued. You mean, like a new house? For us? Yeah, somewhere we can really call our own. No bad memories, no unexpected visits. We could even look for something with extra rooms, you know, for the future, he said, winking at me across the table. So, we started house hunting, in secret, of course. Eric found us a realtor who was more than happy to keep our secret and even seemed to enjoy being part of our clandestine operation. After months of searching, we found it, the perfect house. It was tucked away on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and with a garden that was just waiting to be filled with laughter and play. The day I got the keys, I drove over alone first, stepping into the empty rooms that echoed with potential. Walking through the garden, I could almost see it, the future we'd dreamed of. I sent Eric a picture with a simple message, our new beginning. He showed up minutes later, his face breaking into a broad grin as he walked through the door. "This is it, huh? This is our home." "It is. And there's something else," I started, taking his hands in mine. "I want us to get married again. For real this time, no secrets, no schemes. Just you and me." His eyes searched mine, then he pulled me close. Nothing would make me happier. We decided to do it quietly. There was something beautifully simple about just walking into the mayor's office, the same place we'd filed for our fake divorce, and re-registering our marriage. No witnesses, no fuss, just the two of us, making our commitment to each other official once again. The official pronounced us husband and wife again, and as we walked out, hand in hand, it felt like the weight of the past year lifted off our shoulders. We were starting over, but this time on our own terms. The day we went back to our old house to collect the last of our stuff, tension was thick in the air. I just knew we weren't going to leave without some kind of showdown. And right on cue, as soon as we pulled up, there were Linda and Mark, waiting for us. As we got out of the car, the surprise was obvious on Linda's face, quickly replaced by a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Eric, Anna, what's all this? Moving out?" "Yeah, Mom, we sold the house. We're just here to pick up a few last things," Eric responded, his voice steady but firm. The color drained from Linda's face. "Sold? But where will you be living?" "We've bought a new house," I chimed in, trying to keep the interaction as brief as possible. "It's much bigger, with a lovely garden. A fresh start for us." Her mood flipped like a switch, and she clapped her hands together, a too bright smile plastered on her face. "Oh, wonderful. Then I can start planning where to host my friends. It'll be nice to have more space. So, where is this new home of yours?" Eric stepped between me and his mother, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "We're not sharing the address, Mom. We need some privacy." Linda's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "Not sharing? What do you mean, Eric? I'm your mother." "That's exactly why, Mom. You've crossed boundaries too many times. This is about protecting our marriage, something I should have done a long time ago." Eric's voice was resolute, cutting through any further protests Linda might have had. "I can't believe you're doing this to me, after everything I've done for you." Linda's voice cracked, her demeanor shifting from cheerful to outraged in a heartbeat. "I love you, Mom, but Anna is my wife. She comes first. I should have supported her more in the past, and I'm sorry for that." Eric turned to me, his eyes apologetic. "I'm sorry, Anna, for all the times I didn't stand up for us." Turning back to his mother, Eric took a deep breath. "We think it's best if you start focusing on enjoying your travels again, not meddling in our lives." Linda looked like she was about to explode, her mouth opening and closing, searching for something to say. Finally, she sputtered, "You'll regret this. You'll see." With that, she stormed off to her car, Mark trailing behind her with a helpless look on his face. We quickly gathered our remaining belongings and loaded up the car. As we drove away, I could see Linda in the rearview mirror, standing in the parking lot, her anger palpable even from a distance. Over the next few months, Linda tried various tactics to get our new address. She called incessantly until Eric and I decided the best response was no response. She even showed up at my clinic, causing a scene that ended with me warning her that next time I wouldn't hesitate to call the police. Finally, after what felt like an endless game of cat and mouse, the call stopped. The unannounced visits ceased. Linda seemed to have accepted, albeit begrudgingly, that her control over our lives was over. Sitting in our new living room, the last light of day spilling through the windows, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Do you think she's really backed off for good?" I asked Eric, not quite able to believe the quiet was real. "I think so," he said, wrapping an arm around me. "And even if she hasn't, we know how to handle it now. Together." We sat there, the weight of the past months lifting slowly. A sense of new beginnings permeated the room, filling it with hope and the promise of peace. I grew up in what most people would call a nice house. My dad, who sold agricultural equipment for a living, had worked his way up from nothing to build his own company. He wasn't just good at it, he was really good at it. The kind of good that meant we never had to worry about money. My mom, well, she was something else entirely. She never worked a day in her life, which was fine by Dad. He wanted her to be happy, to enjoy the life he'd built for us. But Mom's version of being a housewife didn't involve much actual housework. Instead, her days were filled with shopping trips, salon appointments, and what seemed like endless meetups with her friends. Dad loved Mom so much, he let her get away with pretty much anything. The drinking with her friends, the shopping sprees, even forgetting to pick me up from school sometimes, he'd just sigh and make excuses for her. I was 9 when everything started to change. Dad had to go on a business trip, something about a big client in another state. He didn't want to go, I could tell, but he didn't have much choice. Before he left, I heard him talking to Mom in the kitchen. "Sarah, please remember Rita needs to be picked up at 3:15, he said. "Set an alarm if you need to." "James, I'm not an idiot," Mom snapped back. "I can handle taking care of my own daughter for a few days." Turns out, she couldn't. The day started normal enough. Dad had already been gone 2 days, and everything had been fine. But that afternoon, when I walked out of school, Mom wasn't there. I waited 15 minutes, then started walking home. It wasn't far, and I'd done it before when Mom was running late. But when I got to our house, I realized this time was different. The house was locked up tight, and I didn't have a key. Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor, was out watering her flowers when she saw me standing there. "Oh, Rita honey," she called out, looking uncomfortable. "Your mom left a few hours ago with Caroline and that whole group. They were talking about some wine tasting event." My stomach dropped. I pulled out the emergency phone Dad had given me and tried calling Mom. No answer. I tried again, and again. Nothing. The hours ticked by slowly as I sat on our front porch. Mrs. Peterson brought me a jacket when it started getting cold, but Mom still didn't show up. Finally, as it was getting dark, I called Dad. "Daddy?" My voice was shaking. "I'm locked out. Mom's not home and she won't answer her phone. I'm sitting on our porch. Mrs. Peterson's been checking on me." "Okay, listen carefully. I'm coming home right now. Ask Mrs. Peterson if you can stay with her tonight. I'll be there as fast as I can drive." Mrs. Peterson made up her guest room for me that night. I could barely sleep, listening for the sound of Dad's car. He pulled into the driveway around 2 a.m., having driven straight through from his business meeting 3 states away. His face was tired but determined as he thanked Mrs. Peterson and took me home. We waited in the living room. Dad tried to get me to go to bed, but I refused. I wanted to see Mom's face when she walked in. It wasn't until 8 a.m., 8 o'clock in the morning, that we heard the familiar sound of Mom's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. She stumbled through the front door, her designer dress wrinkled, her makeup smeared. She smelled like a wine cellar. When she saw Dad sitting in his armchair, her bleary eyes went wide. "James, what are you doing home?" "What am I doing home?" Dad's voice was quiet, but I'd never heard him so angry. "Our 9-year-old daughter spent hours locked out of her house yesterday. She had to stay with neighbors, because her mother was too busy partying to remember she exists." Mom tried to laugh it off. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. Rita's fine, aren't you, sweetheart?" She reached for me, but I backed away. Fine? Dad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. She called me crying, Sarah. She couldn't reach you for hours. What if something had happened to her? I just lost track of time, Mom whined, tears starting to form in her eyes. The girls and I were having such a nice time. The girls? Dad's voice boomed through the house. Your daughter should come before the girls and their wine tastings. What kind of mother are you? Mom collapsed onto the couch, sobbing now. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. It won't happen again, I promise. It took a week of Mom's tears and promises before Dad finally softened. But something had changed permanently. I saw it in the way Mom looked at me when Dad wasn't around, cold, distant, like I was the one who had done something wrong. When Dad was home, she'd put on a show of maternal affection, hugging me and asking about my day. But the moment he turned his back, her smile would vanish. 7 years passed like that, with Mom treating me like an unwanted houseguest whenever Dad wasn't looking. I learned to stay in my room, to make myself scarce, to avoid being alone with her. I was 16 when our fragile family balance completely fell apart. It started with Dad getting sick. At first, it was just fatigue and some weight loss, nothing too alarming. But when he started getting stomach pains that wouldn't go away, we knew something was wrong. The doctors ran test after test, unable to figure out what was happening. Finally, after what felt like endless hospital visits, we got the diagnosis, a rare form of cancer. Mom acted concerned when people were watching, but I heard her true feelings when she thought no one was listening. It's just so exhausting, she'd whisper to her friends on the phone, pacing in the kitchen. Do you know how many special meals I have to cook now? And he's always home, I can barely leave the house without him asking where I'm going. It's like being in prison. I'd stand in the hallway, my blood boiling, listening to her complain about taking care of her dying husband. But I never told Dad. He had enough to worry about without knowing his wife saw him as a burden. For a year, Dad tried to keep everything normal. He'd sit in his home office, making business calls between treatments, pretending the cancer wasn't slowly eating away at him. I'd bring him tea and sit with him, watching him put on a brave face for his employees and clients. Then one day, he called Mom and me into his office. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw his face. I'm selling the business, he said without preamble, his hands folded on his desk. The doctors, they've told me I don't have much time left. His voice cracked slightly. Maybe a few months. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. No, Daddy, no. The tears came instantly, and I couldn't stop them. Rita, sweetheart, Dad reached for my hand. I need to do this. Neither of you could run the company after I'm gone, you're too young, and your mother, well, it's not her field. I won't let everything I built crash and burn. At least this way, I can make sure you're both taken care of. Mom made a show of crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, but I caught her checking her phone while Dad wasn't looking. Her tears were as fake as her designer handbags. The weeks that followed were brutal. Dad got weaker by the day. I started rushing home from school, dropping my backpack at the door and heading straight to his room. Sometimes I'd do my homework sitting next to his bed, other times I'd just hold his hand while he slept. The nurse, Mrs. Rodriguez, was there during the day, making sure Dad took his medications and helping him eat. But Mom? She was barely around. When she did show up, she'd wrinkle her nose and complain about the hospital smell in the house. I just can't handle being here all the time, she told me one day, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. The smell of sickness, it's everywhere. I need to get out, to breathe. What she meant was she needed to party. To shop. To pretend her husband wasn't dying upstairs. When Dad's condition got so bad they had to move him to the hospital, Mom stopped coming home at night completely. She'd breeze in at dawn, looking suspiciously happy for someone whose husband was dying in a hospital bed. One morning, I couldn't take it anymore. Where were you all night? I demanded as she walked in, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. That's none of your business, young lady, she snapped, but I could smell the alcohol on her breath. Dad is dying in the hospital, and you're out partying? How can you? She cut me off, grabbing my arm hard enough to hurt. Her face was inches from mine, her perfect makeup couldn't hide the fury in her eyes. Listen to me very carefully, she hissed. You're going to keep your mouth shut and show me some respect. Otherwise, I promise you, I will make your life a living hell. Don't test me, Rita. You won't like what happens if you do. Dad died on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week before my 18th birthday. I was holding his hand when he took his last breath, while Mom was getting coffee somewhere in the hospital. At the funeral, she put on quite a show. She wore a designer black dress and dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences with a trembling voice. He was my everything, she kept saying to anyone who would listen. I don't know how I'll go on without him. But the moment the last mourner left the cemetery, it was like someone had flipped a switch. The tears dried up instantly, and she was checking her phone, smiling at text messages while we rode home in the funeral car. The next week was surreal. I walked through school like a zombie, barely able to focus on classes. My friends tried to comfort me, but how do you explain to people your age what it feels like to lose your father while watching your mother act like she'd just been released from prison? When my birthday came around, I didn't expect much, but I at least thought she'd acknowledge it. She didn't. I didn't even see her that day, she was gone before I woke up and hadn't come home by dinner. My friends took me to a small cafe downtown, bought me a cake, and tried to make me smile. It worked, a little. I ended up staying at my best friend Jenny's house that night, not wanting to go home to an empty house on my birthday. The next morning, I walked into our kitchen to find Mom there with a man I'd never seen before. He looked maybe 35, a good 15 years younger than her, and had his arm wrapped around her waist like he owned the place. Oh good, you're here, Mom said, not even bothering to hide her annoyed tone. Rita, this is Brad. My fiancé. I stood there, coffee mug frozen halfway to my mouth. You're what? My fiancé, she repeated slowly, like I was stupid. And now that you're here, we need to talk about arrangements. Arrangements? The word felt wrong in my mouth. Yes, you need to leave. She smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. Your father is gone now, and all his money is mine. I can finally live the way I want, with who I want. She squeezed Brad's arm. And that doesn't include having a teenager around. You're kicking me out? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This is my house too. No, it's not. Mom marched upstairs and came back dragging my suitcase. She started throwing my clothes into it, not even bothering to fold them. You're 18 now. I'm not legally required to support you anymore. I want you gone within the hour. Mom, please. Don't mom me, she snapped, shoving more of my belongings into the suitcase. I've done my duty. I raised you. Now it's time for me to be happy. Standing on the sidewalk with my hastily packed suitcase, I felt completely lost. I had no grandparents, no aunts or uncles, Dad was an only child, and Mom's family had cut ties with her years ago for reasons she never explained. With shaking hands, I called Jenny. Of course you can stay with me, she said immediately when I explained what happened, her voice full of concern and anger on my behalf. My mom's been worried about you anyway. She actually mentioned last night that she was afraid something like this might happen. Come over right now. Jenny and her mom lived in a modest 3-bedroom apartment across town. They set me up on their pull-out couch in the living room, bringing out their nicest sheets and even buying me new pillows. It wasn't much, but compared to being homeless, it felt like a luxury hotel. Jenny's mom hugged me tight and whispered, "Stay as long as you need, sweetheart." The next week passed in a blur as I threw myself into final exams, trying desperately to keep my grades up even though my world was falling apart. I studied late into the night, partly because I needed to pass, but mostly because it kept me from thinking about my situation. I had no idea what I'd do after graduation, college seemed impossible now that I had no home and no money. Every time I thought about the future, panic would start to set in. Then Mrs. Peterson, our old neighbor, called. "Rita, honey," she said, her voice gentle but strained. "I thought you should know, your mother is planning an engagement party at the house. Next weekend. She's been going all out, ordering catering, hiring decorators, the works." My stomach churned violently. An engagement party? Dad's been dead less than a month. His grave hasn't even settled yet. "I know, dear. I'm so sorry. I just thought you should know, since..." She trailed off awkwardly. We both knew I hadn't been invited. Hadn't even been told. "It's absolutely shameful," she added, anger creeping into her usually sweet voice. I spent the next few days alternating between rage and despair. How could Mom move on so quickly? How could she pretend Dad never existed? While I was still crying myself to sleep most nights, still wearing Dad's old sweater because it smelled like him, she was planning a party to celebrate her engagement to a man young enough to be her son. 3 days after Mrs. Peterson's call, my phone rang again. This time, it was a man identifying himself as Herbert Maxwell, a notary public. His voice was formal but kind, reminding me a little of Dad's business voice. "Miss Mitchell," he said, "I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. It's regarding your father's will. I've been trying to handle some matters remotely, but this requires your presence." When I arrived at his office downtown, Mr. Maxwell, a kind-looking older man with wire-rimmed glasses and a grandfatherly demeanor, got straight to the point. His office smelled like old books and coffee, and somehow that was comforting. "Your father made some very specific arrangements before his death," he said, pulling out a thick folder and adjusting his glasses. "The house, all of its contents, and the entire proceeds from the sale of his business, everything has been left to you, Miss Mitchell. Additionally, your father set up a trust fund specifically for your college education. He was very thorough in his planning." Mr. Maxwell reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. "Your father also left this for you," he said, sliding it across the desk. "He was very specific that you should read it in private." With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Dad's familiar handwriting made my eyes well up immediately. "My dearest Rita. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I'm so sorry I had to leave you, sweetheart. There's so much I wanted to see, your graduation, your college years, your wedding someday. But life doesn't always give us what we want. What I can give you, though, is protection. I need to tell you something difficult. I've known for some time about your mother's affair. I've known about her lover, about her plans for my money after I'm gone. I heard her on the phone countless times, planning her future, a future that didn't include you. I want you to understand that this isn't revenge. This is me protecting my daughter, the only person who sat with me through my illness, who held my hand without complaint, who loved me unconditionally. Your mother will receive the car and the jewelry I bought her over the years, they're hers. But everything else, the house, the money from my business, everything, it's yours. You can help your mother if you choose to. That decision is entirely yours to make. But I wanted to make sure she couldn't hurt you anymore, couldn't throw you out onto the street or deny you an education. Love always, Dad." I clutched the letter to my chest, tears streaming down my face. Mr. Maxwell politely pretended to be very interested in organizing his papers. When I could speak again, a question occurred to me. "Mr. Maxwell, why isn't my mother here for this?" He cleared his throat uncomfortably. I tried to reach her multiple times. When I couldn't get through on the phone, I sent a formal letter about the reading of the will. She never responded. Of course she hadn't. She was too busy planning her engagement party, too caught up in her new life to care about anything related to her old one, including Dad's will. I left Mr. Maxwell's office in a daze, the folder of documents tucked under my arm, Dad's letter safe in my purse. When I got back to Jenny's apartment, I told them everything. Jenny hugged me so hard I could barely breathe, and her mom immediately grabbed her phone. This calls for celebration, she declared, pulling up a delivery app. I'm ordering from that fancy Italian place you girls love. Tonight, we celebrate justice being served. The day of Mom's engagement party arrived exactly 1 month after Dad's funeral. I put on my best black dress, the one Dad had bought me for my last birthday, and did my makeup carefully. If I was going to crash a party, I was going to look good doing it. The house was lit up like a Christmas tree, with cars parked all along our street. Music and laughter spilled out onto the lawn. The front door wasn't even locked. Mom never was good about security. I walked right in. The living room was packed with people, most of them Mom's wine-drinking friends, all dressed up and holding champagne glasses. Brad's friends were easy to spot, younger, trying too hard to look wealthy. The decorations were tasteless and excessive, like everything Mom did. She'd even taken down Dad's photos from the walls. Mom spotted me first. The color drained from her face before being replaced by rage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, rushing over to me. "Get out, now." She turned to her guests with a fake laugh. "Oh, everyone, this is my daughter. Poor thing, can't accept that she needs to stand on her own 2 feet now. She's here to beg to come home, but I have to be firm. Tough love, you know?" Her friends tittered with laughter. Brad's friends joined in. They all looked at me with that particular mix of pity and contempt that wealthy people reserve for those they consider beneath them. I smiled. Not a nice smile, the kind of smile a shark might give if sharks could smile. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room, "I'm here to collect what belongs to me." Mom laughed mockingly. "Nothing here belongs to you anymore, dear. This is my house now." "No, Mom, it's not." I pulled the will from my purse and held it up. "This house belongs to me. So does everything in it. Dad left it all to me, the house, the business proceeds, everything. You get to keep your car and jewelry. That's it." The room went dead silent. Mom's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "You're lying," she sputtered. "Would you like to read it?" I offered sweetly. "Or should I call Mr. Maxwell, the notary, to confirm? Better yet, should I call the police to remove all these people who are currently trespassing in my house?" The guests started moving immediately, gathering their coats and bags, muttering awkward excuses. Nobody wanted to be part of this scene. Within minutes, the room had cleared except for Mom and Brad. "Rita, sweetie," Mom's voice turned sugary. "We can work this out. We're family. Your father wouldn't want us fighting like this." I just shook my head and pointed to the door. "You're right about one thing, Mom. Dad wouldn't want us fighting. That's why he made sure we wouldn't have to. The door's that way." Mom didn't go quietly. She never did anything quietly. "You ungrateful little bitch," she screamed, her perfect makeup running with angry tears. "After everything I've done for you." Brad stood awkwardly beside her, his eyes darting between Mom and me, then to the door, like he was calculating his escape route. I noticed he'd stopped touching her, had actually taken a few steps away from her meltdown. "Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Like abandoning me when I was 9? Like complaining about taking care of Dad when he was dying? Like throwing me out the day after my 18th birthday?" By this point, neighbors had started gathering on our front lawn, drawn by Mom's screaming. Mrs. Peterson was there, along with the Johnsons from across the street and the Mendozas from next door. They weren't even trying to hide that they were watching. "This isn't over." Mom grabbed her designer purse from the sofa. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll contest the will." "Good luck with that," I said calmly. Dad made everything legally bulletproof. "But hey, feel free to waste whatever money you have left on lawyers." That's when I saw it, the moment Brad's expression changed. He looked at Mom like he was seeing her for the first time, and he didn't like what he saw. A broke, aging woman with no house, no inheritance, and no prospect of getting either. "Sarah," he said, backing toward the door. Maybe we should take some time, to process all this. Mom's face crumpled as she realized what was happening. Brad, baby, don't do this. We can figure something out. But Brad was already gone, practically running to his car. Mom chased after him, still screaming, but he drove away without looking back. The neighbors burst into applause. It's about time, Mrs. Peterson called out, coming up to hug me. Your father would be so proud of you, honey. One by one, the neighbors came up to express their support. Mrs. Mendoza brought over a casserole. You can't live on takeout forever, Majida, and Mr. Johnson offered to help me change the locks, just in case. Over the next few weeks, I heard bits and pieces about Mom through the neighborhood grapevine. Brad had broken off the engagement immediately. Apparently, a woman with no money and no house wasn't what he'd signed up for. Mom had tried staying with various friends, but they all suddenly became too busy to host her. Her expensive friends disappeared as quickly as Dad's money had. The last I heard, she'd moved to Florida to live with a second cousin, the only relative willing to take her in. She tried calling me a few times, leaving voicemails full of tears and apologies and requests for money. I blocked her number. I graduated high school with honors, just like Dad always knew I would. Jenny's mom and Mrs. Peterson sat in the family section, cheering louder than anyone when I walked across the stage. The college fund Dad set up meant I could attend any university I wanted, so I chose Dad's alma mater, a great business school on the West Coast. I'm majoring in business administration with a minor in agricultural studies. Maybe someday I'll start my own company, like Dad did. But for now, I'm just focusing on building the life I want, free from Mom's toxic influence and secure in the knowledge that Dad's last act was to make sure I'd be okay. Growing up in a family business isn't all cash registers and customer smiles. It's early mornings, late nights, and knowing how to handle a shoplifter before you're even old enough to drive. I'm Amelia, and I'd been the heartbeat of my folks' tableware store since I was a kid, slinging plates and cutlery instead of hanging out at malls. The day Mrs. Baker waltzed into our shop changed everything. She owned the bakery next door, and everyone knew her for her sharp tongue and even sharper business sense. I was arranging some fine china, the kind that's too fancy for everyday use, when I heard her heavy steps approaching. Charlie, she boomed, never one to waste time on pleasantries. Got a minute? My dad, a man who never hurried his words, wiped his hands on his apron and nodded. Sure thing, Barbara. What's on your mind? They stepped into his cramped office, leaving the door slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of me, so I edged closer, pretending to fuss over an unruly stack of napkins. I'm cutting straight to the chase, Charlie, Mrs. Baker said, her voice a mix of business and something else, something like excitement but sharper. I want to merge our shops. Expand. Think about it, my pastries on your plates. It's a goldmine. I could almost hear the gears turning in Dad's head. He was cautious, always had been, but Barbara Baker didn't just throw ideas around. And there's more, she continued, lowering her voice so I had to strain to catch it. I think our kids should get hitched. It'll cement the deal. What do you say? Hitched? To Mark Baker? The idea seemed ludicrous. He was nearly 30, and sure, not bad looking, but marriage? I barely knew the guy. Dad coughed, clearly caught off guard. Well, that's quite a proposal, Barbara. Marriage is a big step. Come on, Charlie. It's not the dark ages. It's just good business. Think about it. I'll send Mark over later to meet Amelia properly. Before Dad could reply, Mrs. Baker was already halfway to the door. She paused, turning back with a grin. Don't take too long. I know a good deal when I see one. As soon as she left, I barged into the office. Dad, you're not seriously considering this, are you? He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I know, kiddo. It sounds out there. But maybe just meet him? No harm in that, right? I was about to argue more, but the look on Dad's face stopped me. He was worried, really worried, about the store, about us. So I nodded, feeling like I was agreeing to scout enemy territory. That evening, Mark came over. He was taller than I remembered. "Hi, Amelia," he said, offering a hand like he was at a job interview. "Heard a lot about you." "Good things, I hope," I replied, shaking his hand, feeling the calluses on his fingers. "Baker's hands." "Yeah, your dad's a legend around here. And Mom, well, she thinks this could be great for us. For everyone." Mark and I started dating not long after his mother pitched the idea of merging our families and businesses. It felt like I was living in a sped-up romance movie, but Mark made the whirlwind feel okay. He was the kind of guy who knew exactly how to make a girl feel special, always opening doors, bringing small gifts, and making sure I was comfortable. Despite the bizarre circumstances that brought us together, I found myself genuinely liking him. A year flew by, and before I knew it, I was saying "I do" in a simple but beautiful ceremony. We got married, and with our vows, the two family businesses became one. The merge was seamless on paper, but in practice, it was all orchestrated by Mrs. Baker, my new mother-in-law. She was a force to be reckoned with, steering everything with a stern hand and an eye for detail. Right after the honeymoon, which was more of a working trip to food expos than a romantic getaway, she wasted no time remodeling the store. We knocked down walls and created one large space that fused the bakery with the tableware shop. The new layout included a cozy seating area where customers could sip coffee and sample pastries on the fine china we sold. "I want people to see how the dishes can come alive when they're used," Mrs. Baker explained one morning as we surveyed the construction. "Amelia, I expect you to not just sell these pieces, but to show them off. Serve the customers, make the desserts appealing, talk up the plates. They're selling a lifestyle, not just pottery." "Yes, Mrs. Baker," I responded, tucking my hair behind my ear as I took notes. She had a way of laying out her vision that left little room for input, but it was hard to argue when sales began to double. Living with Mark's parents was another part of the merger I hadn't been too keen on. Mrs. Baker insisted it made financial sense for us to stay with them. "Why waste money on rent when you need to be on hand to help out? The store's just down the street," she'd argued. It was practical, yes, but living and working together with no break was suffocating. One evening, as I was wiping down tables after a long day, Mrs. Baker walked over with a stack of dish towels for me to fold. "Amelia, dear, you're doing a fine job here, but remember, this is your life now. No need for that college degree. This," she gestured around the bustling store, "is better than any classroom." I bit back my frustration, the words tasting bitter. "I know, Mrs. Baker. Amelia," she cut in sharply, "focus on what's in front of you. This business will be yours one day. You and Mark, running it together. Isn't that enough?" I nodded, forcing a smile. The truth was, it wasn't enough. I missed my studies, the sense of working towards something that was just mine. But my new role left little room for anything else. Life in the store became a routine, a rhythm dictated by Mrs. Baker's unwavering command. Days blurred, but one thing became increasingly clear: my dad was around less and less. At first, I thought he was just taking some well-deserved time off, but then days turned into weeks without a single sighting of him behind the counter or in the office where he used to manage the books. One Sunday, I decided to visit my parents at home. The atmosphere was different, quieter. Mom was in the garden, and Dad was sitting on the porch, looking out with a kind of faraway sadness. "Hey, Dad," I said as I approached, trying to keep my voice light. "Haven't seen you at the store much. Everything okay?" He sighed deeply, the weight of his words ready to fall. "It's the merger agreement, Amelia. Barbara had her lawyers set it up in a way that pretty much cuts me out. I can't make any real decisions anymore, and I only get a tiny share of the profits." Frustration boiled over, and I stood up, pacing the porch. I can't believe she'd do this. "And Mark, does he know?" Dad's expression softened. "I don't think he sees the full picture, Amy. Barbara's got him thinking this was all necessary to save the business. The next day, I confronted Mark at the store, waiting until we were alone. "Mark, we need to talk about the merger. Your mom's cut my dad out completely. Did you know?" Mark was rearranging some pastries, but he stopped and straightened up, his face setting into defensive lines. "Mom did what she had to do. My mom saved our businesses, Amelia, turned it into something profitable. We're doing better than ever, aren't we?" "Profitable? At what cost, Mark? My dad's been pushed out of his own life's work." He didn't have an answer, just turned back to his work, effectively ending the conversation. The divide between us had never felt so wide. The very next day, Mrs. Baker cornered me by the coffee machines, her voice sickly sweet. "Amelia, dear, I hope you're not causing trouble. We don't need any mutiny on this ship." I met her gaze, my frustration hardening into resolve. "I just want what's fair for my dad, Mrs. Baker." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that was more threatening than any shout. "Listen, girl, don't poke your nose where it doesn't belong. That agreement was signed and sealed with your father's consent. He knew what he was getting into. I suggest you focus on your job and leave the business decisions to those of us who know how to handle them." Walking away, I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. It wasn't just the business that was under her thumb, it was my marriage, too. Mark's words echoed in my mind, a mantra of profit over family. The pandemic hit us like a sledgehammer. One day we were buzzing with customers, and the next, the store was eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional echo of our footsteps. I remember standing in the middle of the empty store, the silence overwhelming. That's when the idea hit me. "Mrs. Baker, why don't we ramp up our online presence? We could start delivering. People might not come to us, but we can go to them." Mrs. Baker was rearranging a display that no one would see, lost in her thoughts. She paused, her brow furrowing. "Online? Amelia, that's not how we've ever done things." "But it's how things are now," I pressed, feeling the urgency. "We need to adapt or we'll sink." We launched our online ordering system, and I took charge of setting up the delivery logistics. It was chaos at first, missed orders, delayed deliveries, but slowly, it found its rhythm. Before long, our sales began creeping back up, nearing pre-pandemic levels. Seeing the success, I was filled with a new kind of energy. "Mrs. Baker, we should keep pushing this. Even when things go back to normal, this could be a new revenue stream for us. Maybe even specialize in custom confectionery orders online." Mrs. Baker was slicing bread, her knife hitting the cutting board with finality after each slice. "Amelia, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll go back to normal soon, and this online fuss will be unnecessary." "But..." Mark cut in, siding with his mother as usual. "Amelia, we're just riding out the storm. Mom's right. People will want to come back in, sit down, enjoy the experience. This online thing is just temporary." The pandemic eventually receded, and true to Mrs. Baker's word, we returned to normal operations. The online delivery service was shut down, much to my dismay. I watched as our new online customers drifted away, their messages of thanks and requests for more deliveries going unanswered. I couldn't hide my disappointment. One evening, as we were closing up, I confronted Mark again. "We're making a mistake, shutting down the online service." It was working. It was really working. Mark was counting the day's cash, not looking up. "Amelia, the crisis is over, and we're going back to what we know best. This is my mother's business. She's built it from the ground up. We're not going to gamble with its future on a whim." Walking home that night, the streets quiet and the shop windows dark, I felt a deep sense of isolation. The rift between Mark and me grew wider with each step I took. It was one of those heavy, relentless rainy days that turned the world outside the store windows into a blur. I was tidying up the store hall, rearranging the chairs and wiping down wet tables when the door creaked open. A small figure stumbled in, her clothes soaked, her face streaked with tears. Hey, it's okay. You're safe here, I said, kneeling down to her level. Can you tell me what happened? Just then, Mrs. Baker came out from the back, her eyes narrowing as she took in the sight. Amelia, what is this? Who is this child? We can't have beggars in the store. It's bad for business. Get her out. I was shocked, my stomach turning at her coldness. She's just a child, Mrs. Baker. She's scared and alone. Mark, who had been in the office, came to see what the commotion was about. His face mirrored his mother's disapproval. Mom's right, Amelia. We can't start letting street kids hang around. It sets a bad precedent. I called the police. Refusing to let the little girl shiver in the cold, I wrapped a nearby clean blanket around her shoulders and poured her a cup of hot chocolate, which she clutched gratefully, her small hands trembling. It wasn't long before the police arrived. After a brief conversation, they confirmed that the girl had indeed wandered away from her parents, who were frantically searching for her. They thanked me for keeping her safe and left to reunite her with her family. Once the police had left, Mrs. Baker turned on me, her face a mask of fury. Amelia, I'm docking your wages for today's disruption. And for the next 2 days, you're washing dishes to make up for the trouble you've caused. Mrs. Baker, that's not fair. I was just trying to help. Enough, she snapped. You want to run a charity, do it on your own time. This is a business, not a homeless shelter. That night, as I scrubbed pot after pot, my hands raw and my heart heavy, I couldn't help but think about how far Mark and I had drifted from the people we used to be. Every scrub of the scouring pad was a reminder of the love that had curdled into something unrecognizable under his mother's influence. I missed my life before the merger, before my dreams had been overshadowed by the harsh, unyielding world Mrs. Baker had created. More and more, I found myself dreaming of a way out, a path back to the person I used to be. A week after the incident with the little girl, the store was bustling with the usual Saturday crowd when a well-dressed man stepped in. He wore a sharp suit that didn't quite belong in our casual little shop, and his presence commanded immediate attention. I greeted him with a polite smile, leading him through our selection of fine tea sets, which he examined with an expert eye. I'll take the complete set of these, he said, pointing to our most expensive porcelain. And could you add a selection of pastries? It's for a special occasion. Of course, sir, I replied, my hands carefully wrapping the delicate tea pieces as I packaged them securely. I then filled a box with an assortment of our finest pastries. He watched my every move, a thoughtful look on his face. As I handed him his purchase, he extended his hand, gripping mine firmly. Thank you. You've been very kind. Actually, you showed kindness to my daughter last week. She told me how you helped her. I paused, surprised. She's your daughter? I'm just relieved she's safe. The man smiled warmly, reaching into his jacket pocket and handing me a business card. My name's Thomas Avery, and I'm a lawyer. If you ever need anything, feel free to call me. I glanced at the card, noting the law firm's name etched in bold. Thank you, Mr. Avery. Actually, there might be something. Oh? His eyebrows lifted in interest. It's a long story, but it involves a business deal made by my father that I think wasn't entirely fair, I said hesitantly. Why don't you come by my office next week? We can look over the documents together, he offered, his tone sincere. I agreed, grateful for the opportunity. At home that evening, I was quiet during dinner, my thoughts swirling. Mark sensed my distraction. What's on your mind, Amy? You've been off lately, he asked, his gaze sharp. I stirred my food around my plate, considering what to say. Just tired, I guess. As I lay in bed later, the weight of my secret pressing down on me, I realized that telling Mark was not an option. He had chosen his side, and I had to choose mine. Mr. Avery was my chance to make things right, not just for my dad, but for myself. The following week, I met Mr. Avery at his office, a sleek, imposing building that made me feel out of place with its polished floors and stark modern art. Sitting across from him in the high-backed leather chair, I handed over the merger documents between my father and Mrs. Baker. Mr. Avery's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages. "There are several issues here," he said after a long pause. "The terms are unusually favorable towards one party. It's exploitative, and possibly even illegal, depending on the circumstances of the agreement signing." My heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. "Can we do something about it?" He nodded. "I believe we can. I'll need to do some more digging, but I'm willing to help you pro bono, given the situation with your father." "Thank you, Mr. Avery." I paused, unsure how to express my gratitude. "Don't mention it. Let's try to set this right." Leaving his office, I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The thought of going against my husband and his mother was daunting, but the possibility of reclaiming my father's rights was too compelling to ignore. As I approached our house, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses filtered out to the driveway. I paused, the realization hitting me like a cold wave. Today was our anniversary. How could I have forgotten? I opened the door to a scene of festivity, our living room transformed into a miniature banquet hall, filled with friends and family, all seemingly in high spirits. I stepped in, trying to muster a smile, but before I could get my bearings, Mrs. Baker spotted me. "Amelia, there you are, wandering the streets when you should be here hosting," she bellowed, her words slurred by drink. "We're celebrating, in case you forgot." I stammered an apology, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on me. "I'm so sorry, Before I could finish, Mrs. Baker's temper flared, and with a dramatic flourish that only a drunken mind could conjure, she hurled an empty ceramic plate in my direction. It smashed against the wall where my head had been seconds before. The room fell silent, the festive mood evaporating like mist. Mark staggered over to me, a glass of wine in his hand, his smile cruel. "Looks like you need to clean up, Amy. You're dirty as a beggar," he sneered, and then splashed the wine across my hands and down the front of my dress. The sharp, sweet smell of alcohol stung my nostrils as laughter erupted from Mrs. Baker. The room's atmosphere shifted, guests exchanging uncomfortable glances, their earlier merriment replaced by a tense silence. Something inside me snapped. "Enough," I said, my voice ringing clear and surprisingly calm in the suddenly quiet room. "I met with a lawyer today. I'm filing for a divorce, Mark." The words hung heavy in the air. Mrs. Baker staggered forward, her face contorted in a mix of rage and confusion. "Divorce? You ungrateful." "And I'm contesting the merger agreement," I continued, cutting her off. "There's been fraud, and it's going to be investigated. The documents have already been sent to the authorities and the courts." Mark's face went pale, his earlier bravado draining away. "You can't. Who gave you the right to?" "I gave myself the right," I shot back. "For years, I've been treated like a servant in my own home, pushed around and laughed at. No more." I turned to leave, but Mrs. Baker grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Amelia, wait. Let's talk about this. We can sort something out." I pulled my arm free, feeling a surge of empowerment. "Talk to my lawyer," I said, handing her Mr. Avery's business card. "From now on, any communication goes through him." I walked away then, up the stairs to our bedroom, their shocked and angry shouts fading behind me. Each folded shirt and tucked away photo a step closer to freedom. The trial began, and it was clear from the start that Mrs. Baker and Mark were on the defensive. Her lawyer tried to paint me as a conniving, envious woman who was out to ruin the family business out of spite. "Ladies and gentlemen," her lawyer began, his voice smooth and accusing, "Amelia here is driven by sheer envy. She has spun a web of lies, hoping to entangle an honest businesswoman and her son in her deceit." I felt a flare of anger but remained composed. Mr. Avery, my lawyer, was next to speak, and his calm demeanor reassured me. "Your Honor, the evidence will show that my client has acted not out of envy, but out of a need to correct a grave injustice. The merger agreement, which we will present, clearly shows manipulations and unfair terms that were hidden from Amelia and her father." As documents were presented and witnesses called, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew tense. Mrs. Baker and Mark tried to defend their actions, but their arguments fell flat against the solid evidence we had gathered. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, feeling every eye in the room on me. I respected Mrs. Baker and never would have imagined that family could treat each other this way. This isn't about jealousy. It's about justice for my father and for me, about reclaiming what was dishonestly taken from us. The trial lasted for days, but finally, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty of fraud, those words echoed in the courtroom, a sweet sound amidst the chaos of the past months. The judge then proceeded to annul the fraudulent merger agreement and imposed a significant fine on Mrs. Baker, along with an order for financial compensation. However, Mrs. Baker's finances were a mess, it turned out. She couldn't afford the monetary compensation. Instead, she was forced to cede her rights to the bakery to me as a form of payment. My father and I became the sole owners of not just the tableware store, but also the bakery that had been the source of so much strife. Back at the store, which now felt truly ours, my father hugged me, his eyes wet with tears of relief. "Amelia, you've done more than just win back our store. You've restored our family's honor." Mrs. Baker and Mark were now in a dire situation. With no bakery and no savings, they were forced to find other jobs. The community's support had shifted, seeing them for who they truly were, and they struggled to regain any standing. As for me, I felt a freedom I hadn't known in years. I resumed my college studies, each class a step toward rebuilding the life I had put on hold. Life at the store was bustling, better than it ever was. With the bakery's integration, we introduced breakfast combos, pastries with artisanal coffee served on our finest china. It was a hit. Dad ran the floor, his joy in customer interaction evident, while I managed behind the scenes, planning expansions and new product lines. "This feels right, doesn't it?" Dad asked one day, as we watched a family enjoy their breakfast at one of our new tables. "It does, Dad. It feels like us," I replied, my heart light, my gaze steady on the bright future we were building. Not just rebuilding what we had lost, but creating something new, something better, fortified by the lessons of the past and hopeful for the future. My name is Hannah, and this is the story of how my life took an unexpected turn after I married the love of my life, Michael. We met during our college years and fell deeply in love. Michael was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner, kind, supportive, and with a wicked sense of humor that never failed to make me laugh. My first meeting with Michael's parents, Robert and Helen, was cordial enough. Robert, a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes, greeted me with a warm handshake. Helen, on the other hand, was more reserved. She offered a tight-lipped smile and a quick nod, her eyes scrutinizing me from head to toe. "So, you're the girl who's stolen our Michael's heart," Helen said, her tone carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place at the time. "I hope you know how lucky you are." "I do," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael's an incredible person." "Yes, he is," Helen agreed, her eyes never leaving mine. "I raised him to be that way." As the evening progressed, I found myself gravitating towards Robert. He was easier to talk to, asking me about my job as a speech therapist and showing genuine interest in my responses. Helen, meanwhile, seemed more interested in regaling us with stories of Michael's childhood achievements and his sister Olivia's budding modeling career. "Olivia's doing so well in Milan," Helen boasted. "She's dating an Italian entrepreneur now. Such a catch." I nodded politely, unsure of how to respond. Michael squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support that I appreciated more than he knew. The first few months of our marriage were blissful. Michael and I settled into our new home, a cozy apartment in the heart of the city. We spent our weekends exploring local cafes, going on hikes, and simply enjoying each other's company. I threw myself into my work at the speech therapy clinic, finding immense satisfaction in helping children overcome their communication challenges. But as time went on, the cracks in my relationship with Helen began to show. It started with unannounced visits to our apartment. She'd show up at odd hours, always with some flimsy excuse. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Helen showed up unannounced yet again. I was in the middle of cleaning our apartment, my hair tied back in a messy bun and wearing old clothes. "Oh my," Helen exclaimed, her eyes widening in mock surprise. "I didn't realize we were going for the shabby chic look these days." I bit my tongue, reminding myself that she was still Michael's mother. "I'm just doing some cleaning, Helen." "What brings you by?" She ignored my question, pushing past me into the living room. "Cleaning? Well, you could have fooled me. Look at this dust." She ran a perfectly manicured finger along our bookshelf, holding it up for inspection. I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment as our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, walked by our open door. Helen's voice carried, ensuring that every word was audible in the hallway. "Really, Hannah," Helen continued, her voice dripping with disdain. "I don't know how Michael puts up with this. When I was a young wife, I kept our home spotless. But then again, I didn't have the luxury of gallivanting off to work every day." "My job is not a luxury, Helen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a career I'm passionate about." Helen scoffed. "Passion doesn't keep a home, dear." "Speaking of which, where is Michael? Working late again? Or perhaps elsewhere?" The implication in her tone was clear, and it took every ounce of self-control not to lash out at her. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, "Michael is at the gym. He'll be home soon." Helen mused, a sly smile playing on her lips. "Well, I suppose we'll see." I nodded politely, biting back the retort that threatened to escape my lips. Just then, Michael walked in, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. "Mom," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking in on you too," Helen replied sweetly. "Someone has to make sure you're being taken care of properly." Michael's eyes darted between Helen and me, sensing the tension. "Hannah takes great care of me, Mom. And I take care of her. We're a team." Helen's smile tightened. "Of course, dear. Well, I should be going. Don't forget about dinner next week." As soon as the door closed behind her, I collapsed onto the couch, tears of frustration welling up in my eyes. "I'm so sorry, Hannah," Michael said, sitting beside me and pulling me into his arms. "I'll talk to her again. This has to stop." Little did I know that our lives were about to change in ways we couldn't have imagined. A few weeks later, I missed my period. At first, I dismissed it as stress, but as the days went by, I couldn't ignore the possibility any longer. With shaking hands, I took a pregnancy test. Those 2 minutes felt like an eternity, but when I finally looked at the stick, there it was, 2 pink lines. I was pregnant. When I told Michael about the pregnancy, his face lit up with pure joy. He swept me into his arms, spinning me around our living room. "We're going to be parents," he exclaimed, his eyes shining with happy tears. "I can't believe it, Hannah. This is amazing." However, the blissful bubble burst when we realized we had to share the news with Michael's parents. I hoped, perhaps naively, that the prospect of a grandchild might soften Helen's attitude towards me. We decided to tell them over dinner at their house. As we sat around the dining table, Michael cleared his throat and squeezed my hand under the table. "Mom, Dad," he began, his voice filled with excitement. "We have some wonderful news. Hannah's pregnant." Robert's face broke into a wide grin. "That's fantastic," he exclaimed, reaching across the table to pat Michael's shoulder. "Congratulations, both of you." Helen, on the other hand, remained eerily silent. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well," she finally said, her voice devoid of any warmth, "I suppose congratulations are in order. I do hope you're prepared for the responsibility, Hannah. Children are a full-time job, you know." The tension in the room was palpable. Robert, sensing the growing discomfort, tried to steer the conversation to safer waters, asking about our plans for the nursery and if we had thought about names yet. As the weeks passed, my body began to change. Morning sickness hit me hard, and there were days when I could barely drag myself out of bed. Despite feeling awful, I pushed myself to keep up with my work and household chores, determined not to give Helen any ammunition. One particularly rough evening, Helen showed up unannounced at our apartment. I had just returned from work and was exhausted, my feet swollen and my back aching. "Oh my," Helen said as she walked in, her eyes roving over my disheveled appearance. "You look absolutely dreadful, Hannah. Are you sure you're taking proper care of yourself? And the house, well, it's seen better days, hasn't it?" I bit my lip, fighting back tears of frustration. "I'm doing my best, Helen. Pregnancy isn't easy." She waved her hand dismissively. "Nonsense. Women have been having babies for millennia. There's no need to make such a fuss about it. When I was pregnant with Michael, I never let it interfere with my duties." As she continued to criticize everything from the state of our laundry to the contents of our fridge, I felt something inside me snap. "Helen," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm tired, I'm nauseous, and quite frankly, I don't need this right now. If you can't be supportive, I think it's best if you leave." Helen's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "Well, I never," she huffed. "Is this how you speak to your elders? To family? Michael will be hearing about this, mark my words." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, our lives took another unexpected turn. One rainy afternoon, the doorbell rang insistently. I opened it to find Olivia, Michael's sister, standing there with puffy eyes and a suitcase at her feet. "Olivia?" I gasped. "What's wrong?" She burst into tears and fell into my arms. "It's Marco," she sobbed. "I had to leave him. He was cruel to me. I barely escaped with my life." I ushered her inside, my mind reeling. Olivia had always seemed to have the perfect life, a successful modeling career, a wealthy husband, a glamorous existence in Italy. But as she poured out her story, a very different picture emerged. "He used me," Olivia choked out. "He never helped with anything, never gave me money. And now—" She placed a hand on her stomach, and I realized with a start that she was pregnant. Helen arrived shortly after, having been called by Olivia. She swept in like a hurricane, all concern for her daughter and venom for the absent Marco. "Don't worry, darling," she cooed to Olivia. "We'll take care of everything." A few weeks later, I gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Emma. Helen barely acknowledged Emma's arrival, her attention entirely focused on Olivia, who gave birth to a son, Luca, just 2 weeks after me. Helen was ecstatic about her grandson, lavishing him with attention and gifts, while barely sparing a glance for Emma. As the months passed, a clear pattern emerged in our household. Olivia, encouraged by Helen, became increasingly self-indulgent. She spent her days at beauty salons, getting massages and treatments, obsessing over regaining her pre-pregnancy figure. She made no effort to find a job, instead living off her parents' generosity. Before we knew it, it was time for the children to start school. Emma and Luca ended up in the same class, a situation that only highlighted Helen's blatant favoritism. She would pick up Luca from school, often leaving Emma behind for me to collect after work. At school events, Helen made it clear she was there only for Luca, barely acknowledging Emma's presence. One day, Helen fell ill. Olivia, unwilling to disrupt her beauty routine, turned to me. "Hannah," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument, "you'll need to pick up Luca, make his lunch, help with his homework, and get him ready for his school play. Mom can't do it, and I have appointments." I was taken aback by her presumption, but found myself agreeing. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to punish Luca for his mother and grandmother's behavior. He was a sweet boy, after all, and not to blame for the adults' actions. When Helen recovered, I thought things would return to their usual pattern. Instead, she approached me with an outrageous demand. "Hannah," she began, her tone sickly sweet, "now that you've seen how much work it is to care for Luca, I'm sure you understand why Olivia needs help. We think it's only fair that you contribute to his school fees. And you'd be helping out a single mother." I was stunned into momentary silence, then felt a surge of anger. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Helen, I have my own child to support. If Olivia needs help, she should consider getting a job. Fuming, Helen stormed off to complain to Michael. To my immense relief, he backed me up completely. He put her in her place and making it clear that her demands were unacceptable. The day of the school's drawing contest arrived. Emma had been working tirelessly on her artwork for weeks, pouring her heart and soul into each piece. Her excitement was palpable as she carefully packed her drawings into her school bag the night before. That morning, as we were getting ready to leave, Helen unexpectedly showed up at our door. I thought I'd take the children to school today, she announced, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes plastered on her face. Really, Grandma? You'll take me? Emma asked, her eyes shining with hope. I received a call from Emma's teacher just before lunch. Mrs. Johnson? There's been an incident with Emma's artwork for the contest. I think you should come to the school. My heart racing, I rushed to the school. I found Emma in her classroom, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by her ruined artwork. Each carefully crafted drawing was soaked through with what appeared to be orange juice, the colors running together in a heartbreaking mess. Mommy, Emma sobbed as she saw me. Grandma did it. She put juice in my bag on purpose. I felt as if I'd been punched in the gut. Leaving Emma in the care of her sympathetic teacher, I drove straight to Helen and Robert's house, my hands shaking with anger as I gripped the steering wheel. I burst into their living room, where I found Helen calmly sipping tea. How could you? I demanded, my voice trembling with rage. Emma's artwork. The juice. She told me what you did. Helen's face hardened. I'm sure I don't know what you're talking about. Children have such vivid imaginations, don't they? Just then, Luca piped up from the corner of the room where he'd been playing quietly. But Grandma, I saw you put the juice in Emma's bag. You said it was a surprise for her. The room fell silent. Robert, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward, his face a mask of shock and disappointment. Helen, is this true? Caught out, Helen's demeanor changed instantly. Her eyes flashed with defiance. So what if I did? It's not fair that Emma gets to participate in the contest when Luca didn't enter. I was just evening the playing field. Robert exploded. Have you lost your mind, Helen? How could you do such a thing to our granddaughter? As Robert continued to berate Helen, Olivia burst into the room. Taking in the scene, she immediately rushed to Helen's side. How dare you all gang up on Mom like this, she shrieked. Get out, Hannah. You're not welcome here. Stunned by this turn of events, I left the house in a daze. I drove home in silence, my mind reeling from what had transpired. When Michael came home that evening, I recounted the day's events. His face paled, then flushed with anger as I told him what his mother had done. That's it, he said, his voice hard with resolve. We're done. No more contact with Mom or Olivia. I won't have them hurting you or Emma anymore. A few months after the art contest incident, Emma came home buzzing with excitement about an upcoming weekend school trip. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself looking forward to this opportunity for her to create happy memories with her classmates. However, my joy was short-lived when I learned that Olivia was in charge of collecting payments for the trip. I made the payment promptly, making sure to get a receipt and even taking a screenshot of the bank transfer, just in case. The morning of the trip arrived, and Emma was up at dawn, her small suitcase packed and ready by the door. We arrived at school early, Emma practically bouncing with anticipation. But as we approached the bus, I saw Olivia standing there with a clipboard, and my heart sank. Name? Olivia asked coldly as we reached her. Emma Johnson, I replied, trying to keep my voice neutral. Olivia made a show of scanning her list. I'm sorry, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But I don't have any record of payment for Emma. She can't go on the trip. Emma's face fell, and I felt a surge of anger. That's impossible, I insisted. I paid weeks ago. I have the receipt and bank transfer to prove it. Olivia shrugged. I don't know what to tell you, Hannah. If it's not on my list, it's not paid. Emma started to cry, and I felt helpless. The teacher, Mrs. Anderson, approached us, concern etched on her face. What seems to be the problem? She asked. I explained the situation, and Mrs. Anderson looked troubled. I'm so sorry, but if the payment isn't recorded, I can't let Emma on the bus. It's school policy. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, if you'd like, Emma could still come along. I'd be happy to cover her expenses privately. While I appreciated Mrs. Anderson's kindness, I couldn't accept. This wasn't about money, it was about principle. I thanked her but declined, then stepped away to call Michael. When I explained what was happening, Michael was furious. Don't worry, he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. I'm on my way. I'll meet you all at the campsite and pay for Emma's stay directly. She's not missing this trip. Relieved, I turned back to Emma and Mrs. Anderson. Emma will be joining you at the campsite, I said, loud enough for Olivia to hear. Her father will meet you there to sort out any payment issues. True to his word, Michael met the school group at the campsite and paid for Emma's stay. Our daughter ended up having a wonderful time, making new friends and enjoying the outdoor activities. But Michael and I weren't about to let Olivia's actions slide. As soon as Emma returned home, we went to the police station. The investigation was swift. It turned out that Olivia had indeed received our payment but had deliberately omitted Emma from the list of paid participants. She was forced to return the money and faced potential legal consequences for her actions. The rift in our family seemed irreparable now, but at least we were taking a stand. Just when we thought the drama had settled, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law, his voice tight with concern. Hannah, I've heard some disturbing things about the school trip incident. Can you and Michael come over? We need to talk. When we arrived, Robert ushered us into his study, his face grave. Tell me everything, he said. We recounted the entire story, from Olivia's manipulation of the trip payments to our visit to the police station. Robert listened intently, his expression darkening with each detail. To our surprise, Robert picked up his phone and dialed a number. Marco? It's Robert, Olivia's father. I need to know the truth about your divorce. Michael and I sat in stunned silence as Robert put the phone on speaker. Marco's accented voice filled the room. Mr. Johnson, I've been waiting for this call, Marco said, sounding weary. The truth is, Olivia was not the victim she claimed to be. She had constant tantrums, was pathologically jealous, and spent money like water. But the final straw was when I caught her with another man. I had no choice but to end our marriage. Robert's face paled. But what about child support? Olivia said you refused to pay. Marco's laugh was bitter. Refused? I pay a substantial amount every month. I'm shocked to hear you'd been covering expenses. I assumed that money was going towards Luca's care. At that moment, Helen burst into the room, her face contorted with rage. She snatched the phone from Robert's hand. How dare you spread such lies about my daughter, she shrieked into the phone. You're obligated to support her and Luca, do you hear me? Every penny. Robert wrestled the phone back, ending the call. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by Helen's heavy breathing. Helen, Robert said, his voice dangerously calm. Get Olivia in here. Now. Minutes later, Olivia flounced into the room, designer shopping bags in hand. Her smug expression faltered as she took in the serious faces around her. Olivia, Robert began, we know everything. The lies about Marco, the money, the cheating. It stops now. You're going to get a job, starting tomorrow. No more handouts, no more luxury shopping trips. Olivia's shock quickly turned to anger. You can't do this to me, she screeched. Mom, tell him. Helen immediately jumped to Olivia's defense. Robert, you're being ridiculous. Our daughter needs our support. Robert stood up, his patience finally snapped. Enough, he roared. This is my house, And I've had it with both of you. You're both leaving, now. And Helen, consider this the end of our marriage. I want a divorce." The room erupted into chaos. Olivia and Helen screamed and pleaded, but Robert stood firm. Michael and I sat in shocked silence, watching as years of manipulation and lies finally came crashing down. In the months following the dramatic confrontation at Robert's house, our lives underwent significant changes. Robert, true to his word, filed for divorce from Helen. Despite her manipulative behavior, he provided her with a fair compensation package, hoping it would give her a fresh start. However, we soon learned that Helen had handed over most of the money to Olivia, who quickly squandered it on luxury items and frivolous expenses. It wasn't long before they both found themselves in dire financial straits. Marco, having learned the truth about Olivia's deception, fought for full custody of his son. The court proceedings were intense, with Marco presenting evidence of Olivia's unstable lifestyle, her unemployment, and her lack of permanent residence. To our amazement, the American courts ruled in Marco's favor. Luca was to be returned to Italy to live with his father. It was a bittersweet moment. While we were relieved that Luca would be raised in a more stable environment, our hearts ached for the little boy who had to leave behind the only home he'd known. Weeks passed, and life began to settle into a new normal. Emma was thriving in school, and Michael and I were enjoying the peace that came with having distance from Helen and Olivia. Robert became a frequent visitor, clearly relishing his role as a doting grandfather to Emma. Then, one rainy afternoon, there was a knock at our door. I opened it to find Helen standing there, looking older and more haggard than I'd ever seen her. "Hannah," she began, her voice trembling, "I need to talk to you." Warily, I let her in. She sat on our couch, wringing her hands nervously. "I've made so many mistakes," Helen said, her eyes brimming with tears. "I realize now how terribly I've treated you and Emma. I miss my granddaughter so much. Please, I want to make amends. I want to help raise Emma, to be a proper grandmother to her. I was hoping, maybe I could come live with you and Michael?" I listened to her plea, feeling a mix of emotions, pity, anger, and a deep-seated weariness. But as I looked at her hopeful face, I knew what I had to do. "No, Helen," I said firmly. "After everything you've done, I can't allow you back into our lives, especially not Emma's. You've shown time and time again that you can't be trusted. I won't risk my daughter's well-being or happiness." Tears streaming down her face, Helen stumbled to the door. As she left, Michael arrived home. He took in the scene with a questioning look. I explained what had happened, and Michael pulled me into a tight embrace. "You did the right thing," he assured me. "We have to put Emma first." In the weeks that followed, we learned that Helen had found a small apartment and taken a job as a sales clerk in a local store. It was a far cry from her previous lifestyle, but it was an honest living. Robert became a constant presence in our lives, making up for lost time with Emma and forming a beautiful grandfather-granddaughter relationship. The pain of the past few years began to fade, replaced by the joy of our tight-knit family. My name's Audrey, and I used to be your typical married woman with a steady job as a stockbroker at some big-shot company. I had it all, a decent job, a husband of 7 years, and an adorable little girl who was growing up faster than I could blink. But you know how they say life can change in an instant? One day, my husband drops this bomb on me. He's been fooling around with some knockout, and now he's head over heels for her. Just like that, he wants a divorce. I remember standing there, my mouth hanging open like a fish out of water, trying to wrap my head around what he just said. "You're, what?" I managed to choke out. He had the decency to look a little ashamed, at least. "I'm sorry, Audrey. I didn't mean for this to happen, but I can't help how I feel." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel as shitty as I did right then. "What about our daughter?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He ran a hand through his hair, looking everywhere but at me. "I'll still be there for her, of course. I'm not abandoning her." "Yeah, just me," I thought bitterly. The next few weeks were a blur of tears, anger, and more paperwork than I ever wanted to see in my life. My ex, to his credit, didn't try to screw me over. He paid a hefty sum in compensation without dragging me through court, and he set up a generous alimony for our little girl. Small consolations, but I'll take what I can get. First thing I did? Changed my name back to my maiden name, Collins, and my daughter's too. The next 5 years were, well, they were something. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the void left by my failed marriage. We had our struggles, sure, but we made it work. Then, just when I thought life had settled into a new normal, it threw me another curveball. My ex-husband died. I stood there at his funeral, our daughter's hand in mine, feeling a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. Grief? Confusion? Anger? All of the above? As we were about to leave, this guy in a suit approached us. Turned out to be my ex's lawyer. Ms. Collins, he corrected himself, glancing at his papers. Your ex-husband left everything to you and your daughter. He left a letter for you as well. I stood there, letter in hand, feeling like the ground had just shifted beneath my feet. That night, after tucking my daughter into bed, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the letter with trembling hands. As I read, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Audrey, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I hope you'll find it in your heart to grant me this last request. I realized my mistake in leaving you, but by then, it was too late to undo the damage I'd caused. I'm leaving everything to you and our daughter. Please use it to give her the best life possible. And Audrey, I hope you can find happiness again. You deserve it. I'm sorry for everything. Your stupid husband, Jason Moore. I don't know how long I sat there, tears streaming down my face. The bastard had the nerve to apologize now? But as my anger faded, I realized I had been given an opportunity. A chance to secure a better future for my daughter and myself. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with financial advisors and lawyers. Suddenly, I was wealthy. It was surreal. I set up a hefty education fund for my daughter, ensuring her future was secure. But I wasn't content to just sit on this money. I'd always been good at my job, and now I had the capital to strike out on my own. So, I did something that surprised even me. I opened my own brokerage firm. You're doing what? My best friend, Sarah, asked over coffee one day. I grinned, feeling more alive than I had in years. Opening my own firm. And get this, I'm naming it after my ex-husband's last name. Sarah's eyebrows shot up. Are you serious? After everything he put you through? I shrugged. Call it a thank you for the seed money. Besides, it's a good name for business. And you know what? It turned out I had a knack for running my own show. The company took off like a rocket. Before I knew it, I was hiring staff, expanding operations, and raking in profits that made my old salary look like pocket change. One day, as I was leaving the office late, again, my assistant caught me at the elevator. Ms. Audrey, your daughter called. She said it's not an emergency, but she'd like you to call her back when you can. I felt a pang of guilt. I'd been so wrapped up in work lately, I hadn't been spending much time at home. Thanks, Jessica. I'll call her right now. In the car, I dialed home. My daughter picked up on the first ring. Mom, are you coming home soon? The weariness in her voice broke my heart. I'm on my way now, sweetheart. Is everything okay? There was a pause. Yeah, I guess. It's just, you're never home anymore. I miss you. As I hung up, I realized something had to change. I'd escaped one trap of workaholism only to fall into another. It was time to reassess my priorities. The next day, I called a meeting with my top executives. It was time to make some changes, both in the company and in my life. As I looked around the conference room at the team I'd built, I knew I was making the right decision. I'd decided to step back from day-to-day operations, I announced, ignoring their shocked expressions. It's time I focused on what's really important, my family. I hired a capable director to handle daily operations, and I took on a more passive role. It felt strange at first, like I was letting go of a part of myself. But the moment I saw my daughter's face light up when I picked her up from school, I knew I'd made the right choice. As we walked to the car, she chattered excitedly about her day. I realized with a pang of guilt how much I'd been missing. "Hey," I said as we buckled up. "How about we take a little trip this weekend? Just you and me?" That weekend getaway turned into a series of adventures. We traveled, explored new places, and most importantly, spent time together. I enrolled her in various after-school activities, art classes, language lessons, you name it. She was thriving, and I was there to see every moment of it. The years flew by, and before I knew it, my little girl was heading off to college. She'd grown into a remarkable young woman, smart, kind, and surprisingly humble, despite our wealth. She'd chosen to study architecture, a decision that filled me with pride. The day we moved her into her dorm, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. From the struggles of single motherhood to the unexpected windfall, and now this new chapter. I wondered what the future held for both of us. I didn't have to wait long to find out. A few years later, my daughter graduated with honors and landed a job at a prestigious architecture firm. She was thriving in her career, and I couldn't have been prouder. Then came the day she called me, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I've met someone. It's serious." I felt a flutter of excitement and a touch of apprehension. "That's wonderful, honey. Tell me about him." She gushed about her new boyfriend, who happened to be the head of her department. As I listened, I felt a mix of joy for her happiness and a protective instinct I couldn't quite shake. As my daughter's relationship grew more serious, I found myself thinking about the future. I'd been living in our big house alone for years, and it suddenly felt too empty, too full of memories. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. I started house hunting, but not for another mansion. No, I was looking for something with character, something that needed a little love. And I found it, an old house with a neglected garden and worn interiors, but with an atmosphere that spoke to me. When I told my daughter about my plans, she was shocked. "Mom, are you sure? That place sounds like it needs a lot of work." I laughed. "That's the point, sweetie. I need a project, something to pour my energy into." She hesitated. "But what about our house? All those memories?" I took her hand. "Those memories are in our hearts, not in the walls. Besides, I think it's time for you to have that house. You and your future husband will need the space." Her eyes widened. "Mom, we're not even engaged yet." I winked at her. Call it mother's intuition. So, I bought the old house and threw myself into renovating it. It was hard work, but satisfying. As I stripped wallpaper and repainted walls, I felt like I was rebuilding a part of myself too. One day, as I was wrestling with an overgrown rosebush in the garden, my phone rang. It was my daughter. "Mom, he proposed," she squealed before I could even say hello. I nearly dropped the pruning shears. "Oh honey, that's wonderful. Congratulations. We want you to meet him properly," she said. "Can we come over to your new place this weekend?" I looked around at the half-finished renovations and dirt-smudged walls. "Are you sure you don't want to meet somewhere nicer?" "No, Mom," she insisted. "We want to see your new home." The weekend arrived faster than I expected. I was out in the garden, trying to make some semblance of order in the chaos of weeds, when I heard a car pull up. "Mom," my daughter called out. "We're here." I stood up, wiping my dirty hands on my even dirtier work clothes. As they approached, I got my first look at my daughter's fiancé. He was tall, well-dressed, and had a polite smile on his face. But something in his eyes made me pause. I extended my hand. "It's nice to finally meet you. I'm Audrey." He looked at my dirt-covered hand with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was that disgust? No, surely I was imagining things. Pleased to meet you, he said, barely touching my hand before quickly letting go. As we walked into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He examined the old furnishings and half-finished renovations with poorly concealed disdain. So, Audrey, he said, turning to me. How did you afford to send your daughter to such a good college if you're living in a place like this? I caught my daughter's shocked expression and decided to have a little fun. I winked at her, hoping she'd play along. Oh, my ex-husband helped out with that, I said casually. We divorced years ago, but he made sure our daughter was taken care of. The young man's face tightened even more at the word divorce. I could practically see him reassessing me, and not in a good way. Would you like something to eat? I offered, gesturing to the simple spread I'd prepared. No, thank you, he said quickly. I'm not hungry. But I knew the truth, he just didn't want to eat off my old plates in my quaint house. As they were leaving, my daughter hung back for a moment. Mom, why didn't you tell him about, everything? I smiled. Let's keep that our little secret for now, okay? I want to get to know him without all that getting in the way. She nodded, though she looked confused. As I watched them drive away, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something told me this was just the beginning of a very interesting journey. 6 months passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations and hushed conversations. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I had about my daughter's fiancé, but I kept my concerns to myself. Then, on a bright Sunday afternoon, my daughter surprised me with a visit, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Mom, she called out as she burst through the door of my still-in-progress home. We've set a date for the wedding. There's more. We want you to meet his parents this weekend. They're hosting a dinner at their place. My stomach did a little flip, but I plastered on a smile. Of course, I'd love to meet them. As the weekend approached, I found myself fretting over what to wear. I settled on a simple, elegant dress I'd had tailored years ago. It wasn't designer, but it was classic and well-made. I hoped it would be appropriate for whatever awaited me. The day of the dinner, I drove through neighborhoods that got progressively more upscale until I reached the address my daughter had given me. I had to double-check to make sure I hadn't made a mistake. The house, if you could call it that, was more like a palace. It stood imposingly at the end of a long, winding driveway, all gleaming windows and perfectly manicured lawns. As I parked my modest car among the luxury vehicles, I felt like a dandelion in a garden of roses. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was here for my daughter, and made my way to the front door. My daughter's future in-laws descended the grand staircase like royalty greeting a commoner. They were impeccably dressed, dripping in jewels that probably cost more than my entire house. Welcome, the mother said, her voice sickly sweet. Her smile was wide but didn't quite reach her eyes. We're so pleased to finally meet you. Her husband, a stern-looking man with silver hair, nodded curtly. Yes, we're absolutely thrilled that your daughter will be joining our family. She'll want for nothing now, I can assure you of that. I bit the inside of my cheek, forcing myself to maintain a polite smile. That's very kind of you to say. The mother laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. Oh, we're not kind, dear. We're just not prejudiced. We're more than happy to welcome your daughter into our family, despite, well, I felt my eyebrow raise of its own accord. I'm afraid I don't know. What exactly do you mean? The woman's smile turned patronizing, and she reached out to pat my arm condescendingly. Well, dear, we know all about your modest circumstances. Our son has told us everything. Raising a child all alone, living in that poor little house of yours. He mentioned it's practically falling apart at the seams. It must have been so difficult for you. Her words hung in the air, dripping with false sympathy and real disdain. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, she continued, her voice lowered as if sharing a secret. But don't you worry. Once your daughter marries our son, she'll never have to think about money again. She'll finally know what it's like to live in a real home, not some crumbling shack. I felt my daughter tense beside me, but I gave her a reassuring smile and turned back to her future mother-in-law. "Please, do continue," I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. "I'm fascinated to hear more about your generous perspective." The woman seemed to take this as an invitation to further display her condescension. "Oh, darling, I hope you're not expecting any handouts from us. We believe in earning one's way, you see. We won't be extending our generosity beyond our new daughter-in-law." I nodded, forcing a look of understanding onto my face. Of course, I wouldn't dream of it. Deciding to play along with their assumptions, I adopted a meek demeanor. "I'm just grateful my daughter will have such opportunities." This seemed to please them, and they visibly relaxed. As we moved to the opulent dining room, I couldn't help but notice the groom's father eyeing me with a mixture of pity and disdain. "So, tell me," I said, turning to him. "What line of work are you in?" He puffed up with pride. "I'm a stockbroker, one of the best in the business, if I do say so myself." "Oh, how interesting," I replied, feigning ignorance. "Which company, if you don't mind me asking?" When he named the company, my company, I had to use every ounce of self-control not to react. I caught my daughter's eye, and we shared a brief, knowing look. As the evening wore on and the wine flowed freely, the groom's father became increasingly boastful. He leaned towards me, his words slightly slurred. "You know," he said in a conspiratorial tone, "you can't make real money by playing by the rules." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how do you mean?" He gestured grandly at the luxurious surroundings. "You think I got all this by being a good little employee?" "Huh." He leaned in closer, the smell of expensive wine on his breath. "I've got a system, see? I use the company's resources to wine and dine potential clients, then I redirect them to my personal investment schemes. All the profit, none of the overhead." I felt my daughter's hand tighten on mine under the table. I squeezed back, silently urging her to stay quiet. "But surely that's risky?" I asked, careful to keep my tone curious rather than accusatory. He waved his hand dismissively. "Bah, the company's too big to notice. And even if they did, I'm too valuable to let go. It's a perfect setup." As he continued to boast about his fraudulent activities, I simply smiled and nodded, all the while making mental notes. This evening had certainly turned out to be more illuminating than I could have ever imagined. As the evening progressed, the groom's mother stood up with a flourish. "Shall we move to the dining room? Dinner is served." We followed her into an equally opulent dining room, where a table groaned under the weight of fine china and crystal. As everyone took their seats, I noticed the others had plates piled high with gourmet dishes. But when I looked down at my own place setting, I was stunned to see a cheap plastic bowl filled with instant noodles. The groom's mother's voice dripped with false sweetness. "We thought you'd prefer something more familiar. After all, beggars can't be choosers, can they? We wouldn't want to overwhelm you with our fancy food." I felt my daughter stiffen beside me, her face flushing with anger. Before I could react, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Mom, we're leaving, now." Her voice shook with barely contained rage. The groom reached for her arm. "Honey, please, they didn't mean." She yanked her arm away. "Don't touch me. How dare you all sit here and insult my mother like this? I won't stand for it." Her fiancé's face darkened. "You'll come crawling back," he sneered. "Where else are you going to find someone as rich and promising as me?" I stood up slowly, pride swelling in my chest for my daughter's strength. But before we left, I had one last card to play. "Before we go," I said calmly, "I have a question. Did you know that the last name I use is actually my maiden name?" The groom's parents exchanged confused glances. "My married name," I continued, "is the same as your company's name." "More." I looked pointedly at the groom's father. Their faces paled as realization dawned. "That's right," I said, my voice steely. "I own the company you work for. And I'm very interested in investigating the fraudulent activities you so kindly shared with me earlier." Suddenly, their demeanor changed completely. They began pleading, apologizing profusely, their earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. "Please, we didn't know. We can explain everything." My daughter and I exchanged disgusted looks at their sudden change of heart. "Save it for the authorities," I said, turning to leave. As we drove home, my daughter turned to me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea they were like that. Can you ever forgive me?" I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Sweetheart, there's nothing to forgive. If anything, I should thank you. You've helped me uncover some serious issues in my company." As we pulled into our driveway, I felt a mix of emotions, relief that the truth was out, pride in my daughter, and determination to set things right at my company. In the days following that disastrous dinner, I threw myself into action. I initiated a thorough investigation at my company, working closely with our internal audit team and external investigators. It didn't take long for the truth to come to light. The groom's father's boasts weren't just drunken ramblings, they were confessions of real, extensive fraud. The evidence was damning: falsified records, misappropriated funds, and a long list of clients he'd redirected to his personal schemes. I sat in my office, staring at the final report, a mix of anger and disappointment washing over me. How long would this have continued if not for that chance encounter? "What do you want to do, Ms. Audrey?" my head of legal asked. I took a deep breath. "File every possible lawsuit. And contact the authorities. He needs to face the consequences of his actions." The legal battles were intense, but we won every single one. The groom's father was forced to pay substantial damages and compensation. As for his position in the company, well, that was an easy decision. I called him into my office personally. The arrogant man I'd met at dinner was gone, replaced by a pale, trembling shadow. "You're fired," I said simply. "And don't expect a recommendation. In fact, I'll make sure every firm in this industry knows exactly what kind of person you are." Meanwhile, my daughter was dealing with her own fallout. Her ex-fiancé tried to crawl back, all apologies and promises. "Please," he begged over the phone. "I didn't know. We can start over." I overheard her response, fierce and final: "Never contact me again." The sound of her blocking his number was music to my ears. As the dust settled, I made good on my earlier decision. I signed over the deed to my large house to my daughter. "Mom, I can't accept this," she protested. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "You can, and you will. Think of it as a fresh start." As for me, I moved into my small, renovated house full-time. After all the drama, the simplicity was a balm to my soul. I spent my days tending to my garden, volunteering at local charities, and occasionally checking in on the company to make sure everything was running smoothly. One sunny afternoon, as I sat on my porch swing, sipping lemonade and watching the sunset, my daughter dropped by. "How are you doing, Mom?" she asked, settling beside me. I smiled, feeling a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. "I'm doing great, sweetheart. Really great." As we sat there, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple, I reflected on our journey. From struggling single mother to wealthy businesswoman, from heartbreak to healing. It hadn't been an easy road, but sitting here now, I wouldn't change a thing. Life had thrown its curveballs, but we'd come out stronger. And now, in this small house filled with love and memories, I'd found something far more valuable than any fortune: true happiness.
My name's Piper, and I guess it all started when I was born. My folks, they had this weird joke about me being a rich girl with my own house. Didn't make any sense to me back then, and I didn't think much of it. Mom and Dad, they were trying for another kid after me. But it never worked out. Mom kept losing the babies, and I could see it was tearing her up inside. I was just a kid, maybe 6 or 7, when I first noticed how sad she'd get sometimes. I didn't understand then why it mattered so much. I was happy being an only child. I got all the attention, all the toys, but looking back I can see how much it hurt Mom not to have another baby. Life went on like that for a while. Me, growing up, not really understanding the undercurrents in our family. Mom and Dad, putting on brave faces but struggling behind the scenes. It wasn't perfect, but it was normal. At least it was my normal. Then, when I was 10, everything changed. I remember that day like it was yesterday. I was sitting at the kitchen table doing my homework when the phone rang. Mom answered it, and I watched her face go pale. "What do you mean there's been an accident?" she said, her voice shaking. I felt my stomach drop. Something was wrong, really wrong. Mom hung up the phone and turned to me, tears in her eyes. "Piper, honey, we need to go to the hospital. Dad's been in a car accident." The next few hours were a blur. The hospital waiting room, the smell of disinfectant, the doctors with their grim faces, and then, the news that turned our world upside down. Dad didn't make it. The funeral was awful. All these people I barely knew, telling me how sorry they were, how Dad was in a better place now. I didn't want him in a better place. I wanted him here with us. After the funeral, things got weird. Dad's parents, my grandparents, started coming around a lot more. They'd always been nice, but now they were practically living at our house. They'd bring food, help Mom with the bills, take me out for ice cream. Mom, she was a mess. Some days she wouldn't get out of bed. Other days she'd be manic, cleaning the house from top to bottom or rearranging all the furniture. I never knew what to expect when I came home from school. One day, about 6 months after Dad died, I came home to find Mom all dressed up. She was wearing makeup for the first time in months, and she'd done her hair. "Piper, honey," she said, a weird, forced cheerfulness in her voice. "I've got some news. I've met someone. His name is Tom. He's very nice. I think you'll like him." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. It felt like a betrayal, like she was trying to replace Dad. But I could see a spark in her eyes that I hadn't seen in months, and I didn't want to be the one to snuff it out. It didn't take long for Mom to bring Tom home. One day I came back from school, and there he was, sitting in Dad's chair like he owned the place. "Piper, this is Tom," Mom said, all smiles. "He'll be living with us now." From that day on, everything changed. Tom started setting up his own rules like he was the boss or something. But what he did next, I'll never forget. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Tom in the living room, a big trash bag in his hands. He was going around collecting all the photos of Dad. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. Tom barely looked at me. "Getting rid of old stuff. Your mom agreed it's time to move on." I couldn't believe it. I watched as he shoved photo after photo into the bag. Pictures of Dad and me at the beach, Dad teaching me to ride a bike, our last family vacation. When he was done, Tom thrust the bag at me. "Take this to the trash, will you? I'm your father now, the only father you need. It's time to forget about the past." I grabbed the bag and ran out of the house, tears streaming down my face. I didn't stop until I reached my grandparents' house. Grandma opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug. "Oh, Piper, what's wrong?" Between sobs, I told her and Grandpa what happened. They were furious. "How dare she?" Grandpa growled, picking up the phone to call Mom. I could hear Mom's voice on the other end, getting louder and angrier. "If you're going to lecture me about how to live my life, maybe you shouldn't see Piper anymore." She hung up, and that was that. When I got home, Mom was waiting. "Honey, we need to move on. Tom is your father now. You need to call him Dad." From then on, every time I called Tom by his name, Mom would correct me. "Dad," she'd say, giving me a pointed look. "You mean Dad." I felt so alone. It was like I'd lost both my parents, not just Dad. Mom was different now, always trying to please Tom and his precious rules. Then, out of the blue, Tom's son from his first marriage showed up. Jake was a few years older than me, and Mom fell all over herself trying to make him feel welcome. "Jake, why don't you take Piper's room?" Mom suggested one day. "It's the biggest, and you need your space." So, just like that, I was moved to a tiny room that used to be Dad's office. I watched as they repainted my old room, bought new furniture, and treated Jake like he was some kind of prince. One night, I overheard Mom and Tom talking. "I'm so glad Jake's here," Mom was saying. "It's good for Piper to have a brother figure." Tom grunted in agreement. Yeah, Jake's a good kid. Unlike some. I didn't need to hear the rest to know he was talking about me. I curled up in my bed, feeling more alone than ever. This wasn't my family anymore. This wasn't my home. Things at home got worse after Jake moved in. Mom started sending me to my grandparents more and more. At first, it was just weekends. Then it was every holiday and school break. I didn't mind at first. It was a break from Tom and Jake, and Grandma always made my favorite cookies. But then one day, Mom sat me down with this weird smile on her face. Piper, honey, I've been thinking, how would you like to live with Grandma and Grandpa full-time? Well, they love you so much, and you always have such fun there. Don't you think it would be nice? I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but this is my home. I want to stay here. Mom's smile faded. Piper, don't be difficult. This is what's best for everyone. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg her not to send me away, but I could see in her eyes that her mind was made up. A week later, Mom dropped the next bomb. I've enrolled you in a new school, she said casually over dinner. It's closer to your grandparents' house. It'll be more convenient for everyone. And just like that, my whole life was turned upside down. I had to say goodbye to my friends, pack up my room, what was left of it after Jake took over, and move in with Grandma and Grandpa. The new school was awful. I didn't know anyone, and everyone already had their friend groups. I'd sit alone at lunch, missing my old friends and wondering what they were doing without me. The stress of it all started getting to me. I couldn't sleep, I lost my appetite, and I started falling behind in class. Grandma noticed and got worried. Piper, dear, she said one day, I think it might help if you talk to someone about all this. I've made an appointment with a psychologist. So, I started seeing Dr. Roberts every week. At first, I didn't want to talk. What was I supposed to say? That my mom didn't want me anymore? That I missed my old life so much it physically hurt? But Dr. Roberts was patient. She'd just sit there waiting for me to be ready, and eventually the words started coming out. I don't understand, I sobbed one session. Why doesn't she want me anymore? What did I do wrong? Dr. Roberts handed me a tissue. Piper, this isn't your fault. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love, even if they don't mean to. It helped a little, talking to Dr. Roberts. But it didn't change the fact that Mom barely visited. She'd show up on major holidays, armed with presents and forced cheer, but she never invited me back home. High school graduation day. I stood there in my cap and gown, searching the crowd for a face I knew wouldn't be there. Mom hadn't come. Not that I was surprised, but it still hurt like hell. Later that night, as I was helping Grandma clean up after the small celebration they'd thrown for me, my phone rang. It was Mom. Hey Piper, she said, sounding distracted. Congratulations. So what are your plans now? For a moment, I felt a spark of hope. Was she actually interested in my life? I got into State University, I said, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. I'll be moving to the city in the fall. Oh, that's wonderful, Mom exclaimed, sounding genuinely happy for the first time in years. The city, huh? That's great. But as she kept talking, I realized she wasn't excited about my achievement. She was excited that I was leaving town, getting further away from her. College was different. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. No one knew my sad backstory. I was just Piper, the girl from a small town, trying to figure out life like everyone else. I made friends, joined clubs, even went on a few dates. But I never brought anyone home for the holidays. How could I explain my situation? Oh, I live with my grandparents because my mom didn't want me anymore. Yeah, that'd go over well. I'd visit Grandma and Grandpa during breaks, but I never went to see Mom. She never invited me, and I was done trying to force my way into her life. 4 years flew by, and suddenly I was graduating again. This time, Grandma and Grandpa were there, beaming with pride. But Grandpa looked tired, older than I remembered. A month after I moved back home, Grandpa passed away. It was a long illness, the doctors said, but it still felt sudden to me. One day he was there, telling his corny jokes, and the next, he wasn't. After that, it was just me and Grandma. I got a job in town and tried to take care of her, but she was getting frailer by the day. One morning, Grandma sat me down at the kitchen table. "Piper, dear," she said, her hands shaking slightly as she held her coffee cup. "I need to talk to you about something." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What is it, Grandma?" She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking. I think it's time for me to move to a nursing home." I was shocked. "What?" "No, Grandma, I can take care of you. You don't need to." She held up a hand to stop me. "Piper, listen. I've thought this through. I've even saved up for it. This isn't your responsibility, dear. You're young, you should be living your life, not taking care of an old woman." I wanted to argue, but I could see the determination in her eyes, so we found a nice place not too far from town. It broke my heart to leave her there, but she seemed relieved. I'd visit her as often as I could, bringing her favorite snacks and magazines. We'd text each other silly memes and cat videos. It wasn't the same as living together, but we made it work. Life has a funny way of moving on, even when you're not ready for it. I settled into a routine, living in Grandma's house, working my 9-to-5 job, and trying to build some semblance of a normal life. I made friends, went on dates, even took a pottery class. Just normal, 20-something stuff. But then, one rainy Tuesday morning, I got the call I'd been dreading. Grandma had passed away in her sleep. In a daze, I called Mom. I don't know why, habit, I guess. Or maybe some desperate hope that in this moment she'd be the mother I needed. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking. "Grandma's gone. She died last night." There was a pause, and then, "Well, it's about time. That nasty old woman lived long enough." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, how can you say that?" "She was your mother-in-law. She took care of me when..." "When what?" Piper. Mom cut me off. "When I couldn't. Is that what you were going to say?" I was speechless. Mom filled the silence. "Look, I'm not coming to the funeral. You're probably the heir anyway, so you can handle it. Consider it payback for all she did for you." And then she hung up. Just like that. The next few days were a blur. I arranged the funeral, picked out flowers, wrote the obituary. All the while, a part of me kept expecting Mom to show up, to help, to at least pretend to care. But she never did. After it was all over, Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, asked me to stay behind. "There's the matter of the will," he said gently. I nodded, not really caring. What did it matter now? Mr. Peterson cleared his throat and started reading. "To my beloved granddaughter, Piper, I leave my house and all my savings." I wasn't surprised. I'd been living in Grandma's house for years now. But then Mr. Peterson continued, "I also leave to Piper the house at 1542 Maple Street." I frowned. 1542 Maple Street? But that's my childhood home, where Mom lives now. Mr. Peterson nodded. "Yes, it is. Your grandmother owned that house." My mind was reeling. "But I don't understand. I thought that was Mom's house." "There's a letter," Mr. Peterson said, handing me an envelope. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this." With shaking hands, I opened it and started reading. "My dearest Piper, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I wish I could have stayed with you forever. There's something you need to know. The house where your mother lives, it was never hers. It was mine and your grandfather's. We let your parents live there when they got married, but it was always meant for you. Your mother. She's made a lot of mistakes, Piper. Letting you go was the biggest one. I couldn't stand by and watch her push you out of your own inheritance, so I'm setting things right. Remember, this house officially became yours at the moment of your coming of age. All my love. Grandma." I sat there, stunned, and then, like a flash, I remembered. All those years ago, Mom and Dad joking about me being a rich girl and a landlord. It hadn't been a joke at all. Mr. Peterson was saying something about property taxes and transferring the deed, but I barely heard him. My mind was racing. What was I supposed to do now? Kick my own mother out of her house, let her stay? After a few sleepless nights, I decided it was time to face the music. I needed to see my house with my own eyes. I tried calling Mom first, thinking it'd be the decent thing to do. No answer. I left a voicemail, sent a text. Nothing. Typical. So, on a sunny Saturday morning, I found myself driving down Maple Street, my stomach in knots. As I pulled up to the familiar driveway, I almost didn't recognize the place. The once pristine lawn was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and the front porch looked like it might collapse any minute. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. Before I could even reach the front door, it swung open. There stood Mom, and my jaw nearly hit the ground. She looked old, tired. But there was something else. Her hand rested on a noticeably swollen belly. "Mom," I stammered. "Are you pregnant?" She sighed, looking annoyed. "Yes, if you must know. Tom and I have been trying for years. Third round of IVF finally took." My head was spinning. "A baby? Now? After all this time? Can I come in?" I asked, trying to peek around her into the house I once called home. Mom stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind her. "I wasn't expecting visitors. This isn't a good time." I couldn't believe it. My own mother was treating me like a door-to-door salesman. "Fine," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "We can talk out here." I reached into my bag and pulled out the copy of Grandma's will. "Mom, there's something you need to know. About the house. Grandma left it to me in her will. It belongs to me now, legally." She laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You're out of your mind. This is my house. Mine and Tom's." I shook my head. "No, Mom. It's not. It never was. Grandma and Grandpa let you live here, but it was always meant for me." I could see the realization dawning on her face, quickly replaced by rage. "You ungrateful little trash," she spat. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me," I interrupted, my own anger finally bubbling over. "You threw me away, Mom. You chose your new family over me." She opened her mouth to argue, but I pressed on. "Look, I'm not here to kick you out. But you need to start paying rent. It's only fair." Mom's face turned an alarming shade of red. She started screaming, hurling insults and curses at me that I never thought I'd hear from my own mother's mouth. The commotion must have attracted Tom's attention because suddenly he was there, looming over me with a face like thunder. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. Mom, still seething, pointed at me. "She says the house is hers. That we need to pay her rent." Tom's eyes narrowed. He took a step towards me, his voice low and menacing. "Listen here, you little shit. This is our home. If you think you can come here and threaten us." I backed away, suddenly very aware of how alone I was. "I'm not threatening anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just telling you the facts. We can talk about this like adults, or we can let the lawyers handle it." Tom took another step forward. "Get off my property before I call the cops." I retreated to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I drove away, I could see Mom and Tom in the rearview mirror, still yelling. After that confrontation with Mom and Tom, I felt sick to my stomach. I didn't want to fight, didn't want to cause trouble. Maybe I should just let it all go, I thought. Forget about the house, forget about the inheritance. It wasn't worth tearing apart what little family I had left. But then, a couple days later, all hell broke loose. I was scrolling through Facebook on my lunch break when I saw it. A post from Mom, shared by Jake, my stepbrother. My blood ran cold as I read. "Please pray for us. My ungrateful daughter is trying to kick us out of our home. I'm 5 months pregnant and she wants to make us homeless. How could she do this to her own mother?" The comments were flooding in. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, old family friends, even some of Mom's co-workers. All of them outraged on her behalf, calling me every name in the book. My phone started blowing up. Texts, calls, DMs. Everyone wanting to know how I could be so heartless, so cruel. It went on and on. With each message, each hateful comment, I felt myself getting angrier. This wasn't fair. They didn't know the truth. They had no idea what I'd been through, what Mom had done. I sat there, staring at my phone, shaking with rage. And then something inside me snapped. "Screw this," I muttered, opening up Facebook. I started typing, my fingers flying over the keyboard. "I've stayed quiet for years, but I can't anymore. Here's the truth about my loving mother." I laid it all out, how she'd abandoned me after Dad died, how she'd shipped me off to my grandparents, how she'd barely been a part of my life for years. I uploaded pictures of Grandma's will, of her letter explaining everything. "I never wanted to kick anyone out," I wrote. "I just wanted what was rightfully mine, what my grandparents always intended for me to have. But my mother would rather lie and manipulate everyone than face the truth of what she's done." I hit post before I could second-guess myself. Then I turned off my phone and went back to work, my heart pounding. When I checked my phone again hours later, I was overwhelmed. The tide had turned. Now it was messages of support, of shock, of apology. My post had been shared hundreds of times. People were tagging Mom, demanding she explain herself. Jake had taken down his post. It was like a dam had broken, and years of hidden truth were finally flowing free. As I sat there, my phone buzzing with more messages of support, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: strength, determination. I'd spent years trying to shrink myself, to avoid conflict, to make everyone else comfortable at my own expense. No more. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Peterson, Grandma's lawyer. "Mr. Peterson, it's Piper. I think it's time we discuss my options regarding the house on Maple Street." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, paperwork, and court appearances. Mr. Peterson was a godsend, guiding me through the complex process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. "We're not just going after the house," he explained one day. "We're seeking compensation for the 6 years they lived there rent-free, plus damages for concealing your ownership." The day of the trial arrived. I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding, and there they were, Mom and Tom, looking like they'd aged years in just a few months. As the trial progressed, I watched Mom pull out all the stops. She cried, she pleaded, she painted me as a monster who was trying to make a pregnant woman homeless. "Your Honor," she sobbed, her hand on her swollen belly, "how can my own daughter do this to me? To her unborn sibling?" I kept my face neutral, even as I felt my blood boiling. Mr. Peterson squeezed my arm reassuringly. "Your Honor," he said when it was our turn, "the facts are clear. The house belongs to my client. It was left to her by her grandparents, who always intended it to be hers. The defendants have been living there rent-free the 6 years, since Piper came of age, all while keeping Miss Henderson in the dark about her rightful ownership." The judge listened carefully, asked questions, reviewed the evidence, and then, finally, he made his decision. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff," he announced. "The defendants are to vacate the property within 30 days and pay compensation for back rent and damages." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We'd won. Mom's scream of outrage echoed through the courtroom. "You can't do this," she yelled, as Tom tried to hold her back. "She's no daughter of mine." As they were let out, Mom's eyes met mine. The hatred I saw there made me flinch. But I stood my ground. This was justice, not revenge. A month later, I stood on the sidewalk in front of my childhood home, watching as Mom and Tom loaded the last of their belongings into a moving truck. The sheriff was there, overseeing the eviction to make sure everything went smoothly. "You'll regret this," Mom hissed as she walked past me. "You're dead to me, you hear? Dead." Tom just glared, muttering curses under his breath, but with the sheriff standing right there, neither of them dared do more than that. As I watched them drive away, I felt empty. This was supposed to be a victory, right? So why didn't it feel like one? I walked through the house, my house now, truly and legally. It needed work, a lot of work. But as I stood in what used to be my childhood bedroom, I knew I couldn't live here. Too many memories, too much pain. So I made a decision. I called a realtor and put the house up for rent. The income from that, plus the compensation from the lawsuit, gave me a solid financial foundation. And for the first time in my life, I started thinking about what I wanted. I'd always had a passion for baking. My cookies were famous among my friends, and I'd even sold a few custom cakes for coworkers' birthdays. So why not turn that into a business? I enrolled in a small business management course at the local community college, started researching commercial kitchen rentals, began drafting a business plan for Piper's sweet treats. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But for once, I was looking forward to seeing what tomorrow would bring.
My name's Kristen, and I just turned 17 when everything started to fall apart. Growing up, I had what I thought was a pretty normal family. There was me, my little brother who's 10 years younger than me, and our parents. Dad worked as a manager in Mom's family business, a company that my grandfather had built from scratch. It all started with a chain of coffee shops, which eventually grew into this big deal exclusive coffee selling company. Grandpa was a real go-getter, you know? But when he decided to retire, he didn't just sell off the business or let it die. No, he offered it to Mom. I remember overhearing that conversation. Mom's voice was clear as day, "I'm happy being a housewife. Let John handle it." And that was that. Dad took over, and life went on. It wasn't until I hit my teens that I started noticing the cracks in our family's foundation. Mom and Dad began arguing more and more. Mom picked at every little thing Dad did or didn't do. It was like she was trying to provoke him, push him to his limits. And then, when he'd finally snap and raise his voice, she'd play the victim. "See how he treats me," she'd sob to anyone who would listen. "I'm just trying to keep this family together, and he yells at me." I didn't know what to think. I loved both my parents, but watching them tear each other apart was unbearable. My brother was too young to really understand what was happening, but I could see the confusion and fear in his eyes whenever Mom and Dad would go at it. One night, things came to a head. I was in my room, trying to drown out their latest argument with music, when I heard a crash. My heart racing, I ran downstairs to find a scene that would change everything. Mom was on the floor, Dad standing over her. She was screaming, "He hit me." Dad looked desperate. I didn't touch her, Kristen. She fell, I was trying to help her up. But Mom was already on the phone, calling the police. I stood there, frozen, not knowing who to believe or what to do. In that moment, I felt like my whole world was collapsing around me. The night Dad was taken away by the police is etched into my memory. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions. What really happened? Was Dad capable of hitting Mom? Why would Mom lie if he didn't? The next few days were a blur. Dad was released without charges, and Mom, in a show of what she called generosity, dropped the complaint. But the damage was done. The tension in our house was unbearable. Mom was relentless, painting Dad as this monster who'd been tormenting her for years. "He's always had a temper," she'd whisper to me when Dad wasn't around. "I've been protecting you and Tommy from the worst of it." The divorce happened faster than I could process. One day, Dad was packing a single suitcase, looking lost in his own home. "I'm sorry, kids," he said, his voice breaking. "I'll make this right, I promise." But how could he? Mom got everything in the divorce, the house, the car, even Dad's position in the company. He was left with nothing. After Dad left, Mom sat Tommy and me down for a family meeting. "Things will be different now," she said, smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Your father can't hurt us anymore. We're safe." Tommy, young and confused, asked, "But when is Dad coming home?" Mom's face hardened for a split second before she forced another smile. "Oh, sweetie, Dad needs some time to work on himself. But we'll be just fine without him." I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, but every time I tried to question Mom's version of events, she'd shut me down. "You're too young to understand, Kristen," she'd say dismissively. "Adult relationships are complicated." Then, barely 2 months after the divorce, Mom dropped another bombshell. "Kids, I have wonderful news," she announced one evening. "I'm getting married." I was stunned. "Married? But, it's only been 2 months since." "I know it seems fast," Mom interrupted. "But when you find true love, you just know." Robert and I, it was love at first sight. I felt sick. How could she move on so quickly? What about Dad? What about us? Robert, my new stepfather, moved in shortly after. He was okay, I guess. He didn't pay much attention to me, but he and Tommy seemed to hit it off. I'd hear them laughing together, playing video games, and it made me feel even more isolated. Meanwhile, Mom took over the family company, bringing Robert into work alongside her. They were always talking about business, making plans, while Tommy and I faded into the background. I felt lost, caught between the memory of what our family used to be and this new reality I couldn't quite accept. As I watched Mom and Robert coo over each other at the dinner table, with Tommy happily chattering away, I couldn't help but wonder, where do I fit in now? And what really happened between Mom and Dad? Just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, Mom dropped another bombshell on us. She and Robert had decided to move the company's head office to another city, supposedly more promising for business. They were planning to transfer all the capital to this new subsidiary. At first, I didn't think much of it. Sure, moving would suck, but at least we'd be together as a family, right? Wrong. One evening, as I was doing homework in my room, Mom knocked on my door. "Kristen, honey, you know Robert and I are moving for work." "Yeah, when do we leave?" I asked, already mentally packing my room. Mom's face twisted into an expression I couldn't quite read. "That's the thing, sweetie. The new house, it's not very big. And with you almost finishing high school, we thought it might be better if you stayed here." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Stay here? But what about Tommy? "Tommy's younger, he needs us more," Mom said quickly. "Besides, you wouldn't want to change schools right before your exams, would you? We think it's best if you stay with your grandfather." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were leaving me behind? "But Mom, I want to be with you and Tommy. Can't we find a bigger place?" Mom's voice turned stern. "Kristen, this has already been decided. It's for the best, trust me." And just like that, my world turned upside down again. Within weeks, Mom, Robert, and Tommy were gone, and I was moving in with Grandpa. Don't get me wrong, Grandpa's great, but I felt abandoned, cast aside like I didn't fit into their new perfect family. My 18th birthday rolled around soon after. I hoped, foolishly perhaps, that Mom and Robert would come back for it. But no, they were too busy with work to make it. Grandpa, bless him, threw me a party and let me invite my friends. It wasn't the same, but I appreciated his effort. The morning after my birthday, Grandpa called me into his home office. He had this serious look on his face as he handed me a small folder. "Happy birthday, Kristen," he said, a twinkle in his eye. "This is my gift to you, now that you're of age." Confused, I opened the folder and started reading the documents inside. My jaw dropped as I realized what I was holding. "Grandpa, this is..." He nodded, smiling. "That's right, kiddo. I'm giving you the company." I was speechless. Me? Running a whole company? At 18? "But Grandpa, I don't know the first thing about running a business." He chuckled. "You've got potential, Kristen, I see it in you. You'll learn, and I know you'll do great things." Then his face turned serious again. "There's one more thing. I think you should reconcile with your father. Take him on as a consultant. He knows the business, and, well, I think there are some things you need to hear from him." I hesitated. After everything Mom had said about Dad, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. But Grandpa had never steered me wrong before. I met Dad at a small cafe downtown, my stomach in knots. As I approached our table, I saw him stand up, a hesitant smile on his face. He looked older, more worn down than I remembered. "Kristen," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "I understand you're angry. Your mother probably told you a lot of things about me." "Yeah, she did," I snapped. "How you were abusive, how you hit her. How could you, Dad?" He took a deep breath. Kristen, what your mother told you, it's not true. I need you to listen to what really happened. For the next hour, Dad laid out a story that shook me to my core. He explained how Mom had deliberately provoked him, pushing his buttons until he was at his wit's end. The night I saw her on the floor, she had staged the whole thing. Your mother took the police statement back in exchange for me not claiming any property in the divorce, Dad said, his voice heavy with pain. She set me up, Kristen. She wanted everything, and she got it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But, why would Mom do that? And why didn't you fight back? Dad reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Because of this, he said, pressing play on an audio file. Mom's voice filled the air between us, cold and calculating. John, here's the deal. You leave quietly, sign over everything to me, and I'll drop the charges. Fight me on this, and I'll make sure everyone believes you're an abuser. Your choice. I felt sick. Dad, why didn't you use this in court? You could have proved your innocence. He shook his head sadly. It wouldn't have changed the outcome, Kristen. Your mother had made up her mind. But more importantly, I didn't want to put you through any more pain. You were already dealing with so much. In your teenage years, you need support, not more family drama. Tears welled up in my eyes. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have known, should have trusted you. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm sorry too. I know I worked too much when you were younger. I should have been there more. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the weight of everything that had been said. Then, wiping my eyes, I remembered why I had originally reached out. Dad, there's something else I need to tell you, I said, my voice shaky but determined. Grandpa, he gave me the company. For my 18th birthday. Dad's eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with pride. Kristen, that's incredible. Your grandfather always had a good eye for potential. He must see great things in you. I felt a warmth spread through my chest at his words. But Dad, I don't know the first thing about running a company. I need help. Without hesitation, Dad smiled. I'd be honored to help you, free of charge. I'll guide you through everything you need to know. As we continued talking, making plans for the future, I felt a mix of emotions. Anger at Mom for her deception, sadness for what our family had lost, but also hope. Hope that with Dad's help and Grandpa's faith in me, maybe I could turn this unexpected gift into something amazing. The months flew by as I settled into my new life with Grandpa. Before I knew it, I was donning a cap and gown, graduating high school with honors. It felt surreal, walking across that stage without Mom, Robert, or Tommy in the audience. But Grandpa's proud face and Dad's supportive presence made up for it. With graduation behind me, I threw myself into preparing for college. Thanks to my grades and extracurricular activities, I managed to secure a full scholarship. I decided to major in business management. After all, I had a company to run now. The day I got my acceptance letter, Grandpa insisted on throwing a little celebration. Just the two of us, some cake, and a toast to the future. We were in the middle of our second slice when the doorbell rang. Grandpa frowned. Were you expecting anyone? I shook my head, equally confused. When Grandpa opened the door, I nearly dropped my plate. There stood Mom and Robert, looking as if they owned the place. Mom barely glanced at me. Her eyes were fixed on Grandpa, her expression stormy. Dad, we need to talk. Now. Without waiting for an invitation, she strode into the living room, Robert trailing behind her. I watched, stunned, as she rounded on Grandpa. Why can't I access the company accounts? She demanded. And who gave you the right to block the capital transfer to our new subsidiary? Grandpa stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. Sarah, the company no longer belongs to you. It's Kristen's now. Mom's jaw dropped. For a moment, she looked like a fish out of water. Then her eyes narrowed, darting between Grandpa and me. What do you mean, it's Kristen's, she hissed. Exactly what I said, Grandpa replied. I gave Kristen the company for her 18th birthday. All decisions about its future and finances are hers to make now. The shock on Mom's face quickly gave way to a simpering smile as she turned to me. Kristen, sweetie, I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? We've settled in so well in the new city. I blinked, taken aback by her sudden change in demeanor. We have a lovely house, she continued, her voice honey-sweet. There's a big bedroom just for you, with plenty of space for a desk and computer. You could study and work from home. Wouldn't that be nice? I felt a twinge in my chest. Part of me, the part that still longed for my mom's approval, wanted to say yes. But then I thought of everything I'd learned, everything I'd built here. Thanks, Mom, but no, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. I'm happy here. I have my friends, my life, and Grandpa. Besides, I start college soon. The tension in the room was palpable as I stood my ground against Mom's manipulations. Her sweet demeanor quickly soured when she realized I wasn't going to be swayed. Fine, she snapped, her voice losing its sugary coating. If you won't come to us, we'll move back here. We can all live in our old house, just like before. Wouldn't that be nice, Kristen? I shook my head, feeling a strange mix of sadness and determination. No, Mom, that's not going to happen either. I could see the anger building in her eyes, her facade crumbling rapidly. It was now or never. Mom, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, I want you to tell me the truth. What really happened between you and Dad? Why did you really get divorced? For a split second, confusion flashed across Mom's face. Then, as if on cue, tears welled up in her eyes. Oh, Kristen, she sobbed. Your father, he was so cruel. He insulted me, he even hit me. I had to leave to protect myself, to protect you and Tommy. I felt a surge of anger at her lies. Stop it, Mom. I know what really happened. I know you framed Dad. You set him up so you could divorce him and take everything for yourself. The tears vanished from Mom's eyes in an instant, replaced by a cold fury I'd never seen before. How dare you, she hissed. You ungrateful child. You have no right to meddle in my personal life. She turned to Grandpa, her voice rising. Everything here belongs to me. I decide who lives where and who gets what. Then she rounded on me again. You will come home right now, Kristen, and you will hand over that company to me where it belongs. I stood there, shocked by the venom in her voice, when Grandpa stepped forward. His face was a storm of disappointment and anger. That's enough, Sarah, he said, his voice low but powerful. You seem to have forgotten a few important details. This property, including your old house, belongs to me, not you. And the company? That now belongs to Kristen. I gave it to her, and it's hers to do with as she sees fit. Mom's face went pale, then red with rage. She opened her mouth to argue, but Grandpa cut her off. I've heard enough, he said firmly. I'm ashamed of you, Sarah. I raised you better than this. Now, I think it's time for you and Robert to leave. You can't kick us out, Mom shrieked. I'm your daughter. Grandpa's expression was stone. And Kristen is my granddaughter. A granddaughter who has shown more integrity and strength in the past few months than you have in years. Now, leave, both of you. I watched, a mix of emotions swirling inside me, as Grandpa ushered Mom and Robert to the door. Mom's face was a mask of fury and disbelief as the door closed behind them. As the sound of their car engine faded away, I sank onto the couch, feeling drained. Grandpa sat beside me, putting a comforting arm around my shoulders. As we sat there in silence, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. The confrontation with Mom had been explosive, but somehow, I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in our complicated family saga. The morning after Mom and Robert's dramatic exit, I woke to the sound of hushed voices downstairs. Curiosity getting the better of me, I crept down to find Grandpa and Dad in deep conversation in the study. "Kristen," Dad said, noticing me first. "Come in, sweetheart. We were just talking about you and Tommy." I entered the room, my confusion evident. "What about Tommy?" Grandpa cleared his throat. "I've asked your father if he'd be willing to seek custody of Tommy." My eyes widened. "Really? But, how?" Dad nodded, a mix of determination and hope in his eyes. "Your grandfather thinks we have a strong case, especially with what he's discovered." Grandpa reached for a thick folder on his desk. "Kristen, sit down. There's something you need to see." With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside was a detailed report from a private investigator. As I read, I felt my world tilt on its axis once again. "Mom was cheating on you?" I looked at Dad, horrified. "With Robert? For years?" Dad nodded grimly. "It seems so." Grandpa pointed to several documents. Hotel receipts, gift records, old text messages. "Your mother and Robert had been carrying on an affair long before the divorce." "But how did the investigator get all this information?" I asked, bewildered. Grandpa's eyes narrowed. "Robert made a crucial mistake. He threw away his old phone when he bought a new one. Our investigator managed to recover it, and it was a goldmine of information." I felt sick. "But why all the theatrics with the divorce then? Why accuse Dad of abuse?" "It was Robert's idea," Grandpa explained, his voice heavy. "According to their messages on that old phone, he suggested she frame your father for domestic violence. It was all a ploy to ensure she got everything in the divorce." Tears stung my eyes. But Grandpa wasn't finished. "There's more," he said, turning to another section of the report. "That same phone revealed Robert's true nature. He's not who he claims to be. He's a con man, Kristen. The phone had messages with other women, he targets wealthy women, marries them, and then disappears with their money." The pieces suddenly fell into place. "That's why he was so keen on moving the company and transferring all the capital," I gasped. "He was planning to steal it all along." Grandpa nodded gravely. "Exactly. And there's one more thing you should know. I met with your mother and showed her all this evidence. But she refused to believe it. She's in deep denial about Robert's true nature and his intentions." I sat back, my mind reeling. "What do we do now?" "We fight," Dad said firmly. "For Tommy, for the company, for the truth." Grandpa nodded in agreement. "I've already called my lawyer. We're going to file for custody of Tommy and take steps to protect the company's assets." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad fought tirelessly for custody of Tommy. I stood by them every step of the way, determined to bring my little brother home. The courtroom was tense as Mom tried to paint Dad as a monster, spinning tales of abuse and neglect. But her lies crumbled in the face of the mountain of evidence we had gathered. The judge listened intently as our lawyer presented the detective's findings. The recovered phone messages, the proof of Mom's affair, and the elaborate scheme she and Robert had concocted to frame Dad. I'll never forget the look on Mom's face when the judge awarded full custody to Dad. It was a mix of shock, anger, and something else, perhaps the first flicker of realization that her carefully constructed world was falling apart. The final blow came shortly after. Robert, upon learning that Mom was now left without the company, without a home, and saddled with child support payments, showed his true colors. He disappeared overnight, running off with another woman and leaving Mom with nothing but the consequences of her actions. In a desperate move, Mom tried to reconcile with Dad. I was there when she came to our old house, our home once again, tears streaming down her face as she begged for forgiveness. But Dad stood firm. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he said, his voice steady. "But too much has happened. I can't trust you again. Please leave." As the door closed on Mom's pleading face, I felt a chapter of our lives ending. It was painful, but also strangely freeing. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. I threw myself into my college studies, determined to learn everything I could about business management. Between classes, I'd pore over company reports with Dad, soaking up his knowledge and experience. He agreed to run the company until I graduated, giving me time to learn the ropes without the pressure of full responsibility. Tommy, still too young to fully understand everything that had happened, thrived under Dad's care. It was heartwarming to see them rebuild their relationship, to watch Tommy's eyes light up when Dad came home from work or when we all played board games together on Friday nights. We often visited Grandpa, who lived just a few blocks away. Those Sunday dinners became a cherished tradition, the four of us gathered around his big oak table, sharing stories and laughter. Grandpa would regale us with tales from his early days building the company, his eyes twinkling as he watched me soak up every detail. As I sit here now, in my childhood bedroom that once again feels like home, I can't help but marvel at how much has changed. The path that led us here was rocky and painful, full of betrayals and hard truths. But it also led to this, a family rebuilt, stronger and closer than ever before. I know there will be challenges ahead. Running a company is no small task, and the echoes of our family drama will likely linger for years to come. But I'm not afraid. With Dad, Tommy, and Grandpa by my side, I feel ready for whatever the future holds.